esteemed deputy speakers, the honorable majority leader, respected minority leader.
Nung una, akala ko ikaw ang pag-asa upang may ahon ng lahat sa kahirapan at ipanglaban ng karapatan ng bawat Pilipino. Nakatikom ang iyong bibig sa kabila ng iyong narinig at nagbubulag-bulagan ka. Responsibilidad din nakakawa. Mga tao'y nilansing sa hindi maubos mong salapi. Namulong mo na ang iyong dahil sa iyong kasakiman.
Dati, akala mo ikaw ay tao, ikaw pala'y parang engkanto, na malakas manggamit ng tao. Dati, akala mo ikaw ay tunay, yung pala ay hindi. Pinansagan kang tambalos-los, tambalos-los.
Napagkakamon ng iyong mukha, palihim na pala ang pagtuka. Para kang malaking linta, kakapal-kapal ng iyong mukha. Pinipilit na maging hari at tumuntong sa mahaghari. Mga tao'y tinutya, sa kalaswa ang ginagawa.
Dati, akala mo ikaw ay tao, ikaw pala'y parang engkanto, na malakas manggamit ng tao. Dati, akala mo ikaw ay tunay, yung pala ika'y hindi. Pinansagan kang tambalos-los, tambalos-los.
Ayan, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga, people! Yun na! Los! Yan, good morning everybody. Yun. Nako. Ayan, nakapag-live na tayo at kahapon, nako, bawal ako magsalita. Oo, di ba, nung mga nakaraang live natin, medyo masama yung boses natin, di ba? Masama yung boses natin, nagpa-check up ako kahapon. Ginunon yung lalamunan ko. Oo. Sabi ng doktor, ano bang ginagawa mo? Sabi ng doktor, ano ka ba? Singer ka ba? Sabi tinatanong ako. Sabi ko, gabi-gabi, singer ako. Meron akong gig gabi-gabi. Kumakanta ko, tuloy-tuloy, 2 oras ang kanta ko. Minsan, 4 na oras. Sabi ng doktor, magpahinga ka muna, huwag ka muna magsalita. Oo, sabi, huwag ka muna magsalita. Pinanganga ako ngayon, pinanganga. Tapos kumuha ng tiyane. Pinagbubunot yung nandun sa lalamunan ko. Oo, pinagbubunot, kasmay, yung nasa lalamunan ko, kasmay. Ano ba itong mga nakausli na kulay itim na ito? Pinagbubunot. Buisit na yan.
Magandang dilag.
Oh, yan magandang umaga sa inyong lahat at magandang gabi naman dyan sa US at Canada. Medyo okay na yung boses natin Medyo pa lang, hindi pa tayo makapagtiyanak. Oo.
Magandang dilag. Puso ko yung
At, try.
Try nga natin magtiyanak. Ay, pwede na pala magtiyanak, oh. Pwede na magtiyanak, animal.
magandang dilag. Puso ko yung
Ayan, okay, bumati muna tayo. Kasi, Inday, Ilongga, Guapa, Melvin Colona, Chef Bautista Channel. Ayan, May 126. Naku, nandito yung May 126. Pwede bang, 158 naman? Animal. Recto Family, Lady G. Yan, good morning, Marie Carsi. Ate Pelisnel, good morning. Nako, si Ate Pelisnel. Oo, nako. Efren Empante, good morning. Manuel Lim. Ano sabi ni Manuel Lim? For vested interest, hindi napapanahon sa mga ugali ng mga nakaupo sa kamera, gahaman sa pwesto gusto habang buhay. Nako, patay tayo dyan. Eto. Magkakaroon ng Senate hearing para sa amendment ng Constitution. Oo, nako, maraming i-amend dyan sa sinasabi nila three provision dyan sa economic agenda. Nako. Tuloy muna natin pagbate. Erlinda Flores, YouTube, Heidi Alparo, Casmay, good morning.
magandang dilag.
Mitch Roque, Bright Naria, Lolito Conciliado, Charles Pet, yan, good morning. Ate Pelisnel ulit, baka hindi marinig. Yan
May chinita, girl.
Yan, sino pa? Lady G, Nanay Belen Asurin, magandang umaga sa magandang dilag. Ay, magandang gabi pala dyan, oo. Siyempre, pag nandyan si Nanay Belen Asurin, nandyan din si Ate Priscilla Kiso. Siyempre, magkaibigan yan, nako. Salome Bascal, yan good morning. Lady Sheila, nako, iArt Fam, nako, iArt. Buster, is that you? Yes, is that me. Lady Sheila, watching from Japan forever.
Magandang dilag.
Japan daw. Bet Goodson, bargain shopper, good morning. Nako, si bargain. Steve Padios, watching from Long Beach, California. Nako, sa taga Long Beach pala ito. Gandang buntag, Boss Buster. Thank you. Maayong buntag sa imuha. H. Priscilla Kiso. Nako. Yan andyan din. Julie Kines, Lady Sheila, Maura Gonzalez, Elsie Jan, Peter Austin. Yan, good morning
Maganda.
Good morning sa lahat ng mga Pilipino all over the world. Yan good morning. Marmalade Pie, good morning. Paul Ribales, sir, watching from Edmonton, Canada. Alberta, Canada. Alberta, Canada daw. Wala naman kayong ebidensya. Okay, magkakaroon tayo ng Senate hearing diyan sa Senado. Pero bago natin pag-usapan yung topic na yan, yung hearing na yan nagaganapin sa Senado, ang dami nilang papalitan diyan, mga constitution, mga amendments, 'di ba? Mga provision. Meron akong request diyan sa Senado pati diyan sa Kongreso. Bakit hindi niyo isali diyan yung political dynasty? I-amend nyo o isabatas ninyo. Pangalawa, etong plunder law na isinibatas ninyo. Yung plunder law,
Magandang dilag.
Betty Smith, ayan, ang from Tokyo, Mirna de Guzman. Yung plunder law, biruin mo, akalain mo, isipin mo. Di ba? Isipin mo. Watching from South Korea, yan si Mutya ng Diwata, di ba? Ano daw? Ano sabi? Bakit parang selective ka research mo yung FB at mga pidting ko? Ano yun? Ano yung Paul Ribas? Hindi kita maintindihan. Ayusin mo muna yung pagtatype mo At saka yung pagbuo mo ng sentence. yung pangungusap. Okay eto okay naman yan, pag-usapan yung economic provision, kung yun ang makakatulong sa ating pagpapalago ng ekonomiya, walang problema, hindi naman natin tututulan yan. Pero sana, asikasuhin din nila yung political dynasty law, yung plunder law, at saka lalong-lalo na yung tinatawag nilang
Magandang dilag.
yung tinatawag nilang Concurrent Resolution number 10. Nakakalimutan na natin yun yung problema na yan, yung Concurrent Resolution number 10. Lalong-lalo na yung plunder law. Bakit ba napaka-espesyal sa mga politiko yung plunder law? Bakit nga ba? Biruin mo, bago ka makasuha ng plunder, bago ka makasuha ng pandarambong, kinakailangan muna magnakaw ka ng 50 million pataas. Kinakailangan munang magnakaw ka ng 50 million pataas. Pagka 49,999,999 pesos and 99 cents, hindi ka pwedeng makasuha ng plunder. Hindi ka makakasuha ng pandarambong. Dahil wala pang 50 million ang ninakaw mo. Dahil yon ay naaayon sa ginawa nilang batas. Bakit ang mga ordinaryong mamamayang Pilipino, pag nagnakaw sa puno ng mangga, pag nagnakaw ng isang lata ng corn beef diyan sa 7-Eleven, kulong? Kulong. Kulong. Bakit ang mga ordinaryong mamamayan na yung mga kumakapit sa patalim, hindi exempted ang mga diyan mga gumagamit at nagbebenta ng mga illegal na droga. Hindi exempted diyan ang mga holdupper, kidnapper, yung mga ordinaryong mamayaman, yung gawa ng kahirapan, yung gutom, yung halimbawa magnanakaw ng kakainin niya sa oras na iyon. Kulong. Pero pagka ang politiko nagnakaw ng 1 milyon, 2 milyon, 3 milyon, 4 milyon, hanggang 49 milyon, bawal idemanda ng plunder. Dapat 50 milyon. Pag walang 50 milyon, walang kaso, walang plunder, animal. Bakit hindi kayo magpatupad ng batas dyan sa Kongreso kaysa inuuna nyo yung tsa-tsa na yan? Bakit hindi kayo hindi nyo i-amend? Ayun ang mga dapat na ina-amend ninyong mga batas. Kung ano-ano pinagpapalitan ninyo dyan, unahin nyo yung batas para sa sarili ninyo. Kagaya ng mga red tape, corruption diyan, hindi naman sinasabi ng mga negosyante, ng mga mamumuhunan, ng mga foreign investor na kinakailangang palitan ang konstitusyon natin, ang economic provision ng konstitusyon natin. Hindi naman kailangan dapat palitan. Ang kailangang palitan yung mga namumuno sa bawat ahensya dahil sa corruption. Pagkasambahay, nagnakaw sa amo, qualified theft agad. Pero pagka ang politiko nagnakaw ng 49 million, walang plunder.
Magandang dilag.
Palakpakan natin sila. Aba, putang ina. Nasaan na yung sounds ko na ano, na putang ina talaga. Buwisit talaga. Nasaan na yon? Di ba? Isipin ninyo. Saan ka nakakita na gumagawa sila ng batas, pagkatapos yung batas para sa kanilang sarili, hindi nila animal. Bakit ganon? Bakit ganon? Bakit ganon sila? Animal. Hindi pwedeng i-amend yung plunder law dahil parang pinatigil sa kanilang gawain maniwala sa kanilang source of income. Animal. Diba? Pero pag ordinaryong mamamayan, kahit katulong pag nagnakaw ka, kumupit ka lang ng sukli, pwede kang kasuhan ng TEP. Buster, bakit kailangan 50 million? Hindi ko alam sa kanila. Sila ang gumawa ng batas na yan. Diba? Ano kayo? Ano kayong mga politiko kayo? Special child kayo? Mga special child kayo? Pag ordinaryong mamayang Pilipino, magnakaw ka ng 50 pesos, 100 piso, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, kulong.
With your permission, we'd like to start and resume. Call to order this.
Di ba? Nag-uumpisa na ang hearing. Di ba? Etong panonorin natin ngayon, hearing ito. Ito ay hearing. Pag-uusapan nila dyan tungkol sa amendment ng ating konstitusyon. Bakit? Putang ina, kung ano-ano pinagpapapalitan yung mga hinayupa kayo dyan, pero sarili nyo, hindi nyo maikorek. Good morning, Buster and all here. Copy tayo, mga dear. Oy, thank you sa pa-copy.
Magandang dilag.
Meow, good morning. Pats Pagula, anong sabi? Corrupt politician ang palitan, hindi correct. Correct. Dapat, ganito Alam nyo sa totoo lang, kung maaalala ninyo, kung alam ninyo, yung kaso ng libel, pag kinasuhan ko ng ordinary libel, reclusion, kunyari, reclusion perpetua, prison mayor ang hatol sa'yo, prison mayor. Pero pagka cyber libel, times 2. Yung magiging parusa mo, magiging times 2, imbis na prison mayor, magiging reclusion perpetua. Ibig sabihin, times 2 ang hatol. Dapat sa mga politiko, dahil isa silang mga public figure, isa silang mga nanumpa sila sa konstitusyon, nanumpa sila sa batas at sa Diyos na ipaglalaban nila kung ano sinasabi ng konstitusyon, at isa silang mga public servant, dapat sa kanila, pagka nakasuhan, times 2 rin yung hatol. Pagka nakasuhan sila, times 2 rin ang hatol. Halimbawa, magnakaw sila ng 200,000 piso, pagpalagay mo ng 100 piso, 200 piso, dapat may kaso rin sila. Tatas kung ano ang hatol doon sa ordinaryong mamamayang Pilipino, times 2 dapat sa kanila. Hindi. Times 1,050, times 50,000. Kailangan ang pera na nanakawin mo bago ka mahatulan. Ganon sila. Imbis na hatol o parusa, ang doblehin sa kanila, putang na hindi. Yung ninakaw kailangan doble bago ka makasuhan. Ganon sila katindi. Di ba? Imbes na, halimbawa si Elsie Chan na isang congresswoman, dapat pag nagnakaw si Elsie Chan, ang parusa doble. Sa ordinaryong kaso. Kung ano yung kaso ni Lady G na ordinaryong Pilipino, dapat doble ang parusa pag napatunayan si Elsie Chan dahil isa siyang politiko. Pero hindi nangyayari yun. Ang nangyayari, kailangan doble muna nakawin ni Elsie Chan. Animal. O, di ba? Saan ka nakakita ng ganyang batas? Safety and security vlog, medyo okay na kasi pinagbawalan tayong maglabas ng boses kahapon. Napipi ako kahapon, puro ako sign language. O, di ba? Bakit hindi yun ang pagtuunan ng pansin ng mga politiko? Yun ang nakakainis. Bakit hindi yun ang pagtuunan nila ng pansin? Kung ano-anong pinapalitan nila, kung ano-anong batas ang inaamin nila, kung ano-anong batas ang pinapasa nila. Bakit hindi magsimula sa Kongreso yung panukala na yan, na yung plunder dapat kung magkano o ano ang ikinaso ng pagnanakaw ng isang ordinaryong Pilipino, dapat ganun din ang kaso ninyo. Kasuhan kayo ng plunder. Diba? Dapat parehas. Bakit hindi pantay ang batas? Bakit hindi pantay ang batas? Ano ba? Kaya kami ba, dapat ba na maniwala na kami na ang batas ay para lamang sa mayaman? Dapat bang maniwala kami sa kanta, habang may tatsulok at kayo ang nasa tuktok, di matitigil itong pagnanakaw? Di ba? Dapat ganon. Dapat ang batas walang pinipili. Kung ano ang batas kay Pedro, yun din ang dapat ipinapataw na batas kay Juan. Ha? Di ba? Mariosep. Napakahusay. Kagaya niya ni Risa Hontiveros. Ang dami ninakaw niya sa PhilHealth, oh. Di ba? Ang dami niyan. Nung panahon ni Pinoy, ang daming pera niya na itinaka sa PhilHealth. Bakit hindi yan ipiniliwanag ni Risa Hontiveros? Oy, meron pala tayong komentor dito. Ipaliwanag kung paano ginastos ang intelligence fund ng 11 days. Dami gutom na Pilipino at walang hanap buhay. Milyong Pilipino. Mabuhay ka, Senator Risa Hontiveros. Ninakaw mo yung pera ng PhilHealth. Di ba? O, ano na? Kailangan munang magnakaw, wag lang paabuti ng 50 million para hindi ka makasuhan ng plunder. Ay, pakipaliwanag mo nga, Eddie Gatchalian. Tanong mo nga kay Risa Hontiveros kung paano niya ginastot o paano niya ninakaw yung pondo ng PhilHealth na ilang milyon yon. Ilang daang milyon ba yon? Ilang daang milyon ba o ilang bilyon ang perang kinakasangkutan ni Risa Hontiveros? Paki-research nyo, animal. Mitchang, good morning sa'yo. Good morning, ha? Research nga natin yan. Risa Hontiveros PhilHealth. Risa Hontiveros. Ano ba pangalan ni Risa? S ba yun? Risa ba yun? Risa Hontiveros. On PhilHealth. PhilHealth. Ano bang mga nangyari dyan? Nako, putang ina, eto. Ay nako, patay. Ano ba sabi dito sa Vera Files? Vera Files, kanila ito Kanila itong Vera Files Ano ba ito? Ano ba to sinasabi nito, Eddie Gatchalian? Ano mga to? Ano sabi Vera Files, fact check. Ayan meron daw dito. Nako, 83 million PhilHealth. Oo, nako. Nako, patay tayo dyan. Nako, meron pala siyang 84 million. 83 million PhilHealth. Nako, na-involved. Nako, patay tayo dyan. Ano nangyari rito? Patay. Hanapin nga natin. Nako. Patay tayo dito. Ano to? Hontiveros confirmed have stolen 15 billion. Ano to? 15 billion. Risa Hontiveros. Ano to? Nako, may mga taga-fact check pa silang mga rappler. Alam naman natin na rappler. Nako, patay tayo nito. 15 billion pala ito. Sabi, false daw. Hontiveros confirmed to have stolen 15 million. Ay, 15 billion. Billion pala ito. Sa PhilHealth, yung kaso ni Risa Hontiveros. Nako. Ayan patay tayo dito. 15 billion pala. Totoo ba ito? Nako, ano ginawa ni rito? PhilHealth scam, 15 billion. Proud, other allegation. Nako. Hanip. Eddie Gatchalian, nandiyan ka pa? Pakitanong mo nga, ipaliwanag ni Risa Hontiveros kung saan niya dinala yung 15 billion dyan sa PhilHealth. Diba? Pakipaliwanag mo rin. Kasi pinatanong mo, ipaliwanag yung kung paano ginastos yung 11 days yung 125 million, yung intelligence fund. Pakitanong mo rin kay Risa Hontiveros kung totoo ba yung 15 billion na PhilHealth scam na yan. Di ba? Ano na? Nawala na si Eddie Gatchalian. Eddie Gatchalian, sus labas. Nawala si Eddie Gatchalian, ano na? Wala na? Eddie Gatchalian, baka naman nanonood ka at nakikinig ka pa dyan. Paki-explain mo naman ito. Ito, ginugil ko. Nako! Sa susunod, pag-usapan natin yan, itapik natin yan, starring Eddie Gatchalian. Supporting Risa Hontiveros. Di ba? At saka Eddie Gatchalian, huwag kang tanga i-research mo rin, meron ng COA report yan, yung sinasabi mong 11 days na 125 million. I-research mo Tapos, i-research ko naman itong involvement ni Risa Hontiveros sa pagnanakaw ng pondo ng PhilHealth. Okay Ate Cristina Minjola, good morning to you. Good morning. Nasaan na si Eddie Gatchalian, wag kang tanga. Bilisan mo, sumagot ka. Sinasabi ko na sa inyo, pagpapasok kayo rito sa live ko, wag kayong puro ad hominem. Kailangan putang na may knowledge kayo. Dapat may alam kayo. Diba? Sus Mariosep. Baka puro lang kayo ganyan, tapos hindi nyo kayang sumalag. So, salag-salag din. Wala na? Criselda Reyes, good morning sa'yo. Good morning, Nako, umpisa na yata ang committee hearing. Nagsasalita na ba si Grace
and
po?
foreign investments in renewable energy resources. Filipino companies have partnered with foreign investors.
O,
with the
manonood na ba
Mabini
tayo?
Wind Power
Manonood na ba tayo? O, pag-usapan muna natin itong mga putang... Ay, eto Ito. Di ba, nung binalita ko nung last live ko na magkakaroon ng... may ipinapasang batas itong si Senator Jingo Estrada na dagdag na 100 pesos minimum wage sa mga private employee o ng NCR. Ay hindi lang pala yan sa NCR mangyayari. Buong Pilipinas pala, nationwide pala yan. Yung 100 pesos across the board na malapit nang maipasa. O, siyempre, kinakailangan, pagka merong isinusulong na batas ang Kongreso, dapat meron din yung counter may isinusulong na batas ang Senado, meron din yung suporta ng Kongreso. Oo, kailangan may pareha silang ipinapasang batas, nagpapasa ng batas ang Kongreso, magpapasa ng batas ang Senado, tapos pag-uusapan nila sa BICAM, pagbobotohan nila yan sa BICAM. O ito naipasa namin sa Kongreso ba? Meron. Anong sabi ng Kongreso tungkol dyan sa pagpapatupad ng 100 pesos across the board hike. Yan. Oo, para sa mga minimum wage earner. Pakinggan muna natin ito bago tayo tumulak sa hearing O, pag-usapan lang natin. Ano sabi ng Congress? Oo, yung Vice Chairman ng Labor na si Gas Tambunting. Pasok nga, Manong Ted, pasok.
Alright, mga kapatid, ito ho, at kami nagagalak po na pumayag na magkaroon po tayo ng panayam sa Vice Chairman po ng Committee on Labor sa House of Representatives para po naman tanungin sila kung meron na ho bang pending na counterpart bill itong bill po sa Senado.
Ayan,
Ito ho pinangungunahan ni
bill,
Senator Jingo
counterpart
Estrada
bill.
bilang Committee on Labor Chairman in the Senate. At ilang alamin dahil po mukha daw ho ngayong linggo ay mailulusot na po nila sa Senado itong panukala po ng 100 pesos across the board na wage increase. Si Congressman Gaston Bunting ng Parañaque City. Ngayon daw ho ay Foundation Day ng Parañaque, baby girl. Kaya maganda umaga po sa mga taga Parañaque. Mabuhay ang aking mga kababata dyan sa San Dionisio sa Parañaque. Increase si Congressman Gaston Bunting ng Parañaque City. Ngayon daw ho ay Foundation Day ng Parañaque, baby girl. Kaya maganda umaga po sa mga taga Parañaque. Mabuhay ang aking mga kababata dyan sa San Dionisio sa Parañaque. Umaga po sa mga taga Parañaque. Mabuhay ang aking mga kababata. Araw po na ito ng inyo pong Foundation Day po ninyo.
Opo, magandang kay DJ Chacha. Magandang umaga po sa inyo.
Opo, salamat sa panahon po, Congressman. Across the board, sa Senado po, it's 100 pesos.
Well, I know that there has been hearings, and talks about it, pero there's nothing firm about it. Kasi personally, kami po ay sumusuporta. Sumusuporta po kami na kumanda ang buhay, ang wages ng ating mga kababayan, especially ng ating Filipino workforce, Dapat po talaga gumanda ang kanilang wages at ang kanilang mga benefits. But of course, may mga agam-agam ang karamihan at ito po ay pinag-aaralan. Kasi alam naman po natin, ang mga concerns dyan is one, when you do a wage increase, it is inflationary. Tumataas at ang cost of goods and services, tumataas po ang mga produkto, at ito ay is a concern. Kasi the Senate pegged it at 100 pesos. And 100 pesos, and across the board, in entire Philippines, which goes to the second point, which is what happens now to the law that this has been delegated to the regional wage boards. Kasi alam po natin na iba po ang sitwasyon bawat lugar. Iba po problema ng Maynila, iba ang problema ng Occidental Mindoro, iba po ang problema ng Bohol.
Ano daw? Iba ang problema ng Bohol, iba ang problema ng Mindoro, iba ang problema bawat ibang lugar, ganon. Paano naging iba ang problema pa rin ng lahat, yung mataas na presyo ng bilihin? Congressman Tambunting, kaya nga ang mga probinsyano, ang mga nasa Mindanao, nasa Bisaya, ay pumupunta ng Maynila dahil mataas ang sweldo rito. Minimum, mataas ang minimum wage dito. Kung 100, meron lamang. Kaya nga nagpupuntahan sila sa Maynila eh. Tapos sasabihin mo, iba ang problema doon? Ha? Talaga, Tambunting? Okay ka? Kaya nga sila nagpupuntahan dito eh. Nagbabaka sakali nakikipagsapalaran dito sa Maynila dahil mataas, medyo mataas, may kataasan ang sweldo. Tapos sasabihin mo, iba ang problema diyan sa Bohol, sa Mindoro. Iba na utak mo. At tuloy.
Iba po problema Bohol, iba po problema Romblon, iba po problema ng Zamboanga, iba po problema ng Jensan, no? So you can imagine na pag ito, no? So you can imagine na pag ito ay pinare-pareho nyo, meron ho dyan, 300, 400, 100 is a 25% increase, no? So medyo may distortion ho, no? At ito ay may not be good for the Filipinos at the end of the day. Kaya kailangan mo pag-aralan mabuti because this can be inflationary. At mangyari, yung mga kinukuha natin mga dilatang sardinas sa iba't ibang region, tataas po yan dahil magtataas ang sweldo by 35%. Di tataas din ang isang produkto, isang latang ng sardinas, tataas yan. So, at the end of the day, baka wala rin humapuntahan yung 100 pesos. So I think, ang sense pa rin ng House, no, medyo kailangan mo talaga pag-aralan because meron mo tayong regional wage boards wherein bawat region pinag-aaralan mabuti ang magkano ang dapat na increase depending on the economic activity in that area. Yan po ang dapat pag-aralan.
Opo, sige po. Well said. So to say it briefly, Congressman, is there a slim chance of this passing your committee or no chance at all?
Well, I'm the vice chair of the committee. Of course, I will have to defer to the other members. Pero as it stands, it's not as aggressive as what the Senate is doing yet, no? And we will have to see how things will move. But I think we will really have to defer. It's something that, I've been a congressman for 3 terms, and this is the first time that I've seen something like this.
Opo.
And that the regional wage boards now, ang tanong ko, ano mangyari to? If it's now bumalik na naman sa amin, what happens now to the regional wage boards? Which is supposed to study the economic activity per region which will determine the rate of increase of the minimum wage.
Okay, sige po. So, sa ngayon po, wala...
But right now, if you ask me right now, it's not aggressive. It's being talked about but not in an aggressive way.
Opo. So, hindi ito prioridad?
Marami pa po tayong prioridad ang House, no? Ang pinag-usapan ko dito.
So, ibig sabihin, hindi prioridad ng Congress ang pagpapataas ng sweldo ng mga manggagawa. At mas marami daw silang prioridad. Ang priority nila, palitan o amyendahan ang konstitusyon. Mas yun ang prioridad nila. Mas prioridad nila ang maipasa yung mga economic provision na gusto nilang mangyari kaysa sa taasan ang sweldo ng mga gagawang Pilipino. Ganon sila sa Congress. E di wow. Yan ang Kongreso. Prioridad nila ang PI. Ganon sila katindi. Yan ang Congress. Palakpakan natin. Bigyan natin isang masigabong palakpakan. Di ba? Ay, nako, visit na yan.
Magandang dilag.
Shoutout sa inyong lahat, ha? Shoutout sa mga gandang dilag na mga bagong dating natin dyan, ha? Yan, Leonida Putusa, Perla Baba, good morning. Mas priority nila, dapat bigyan nyo na rin ng priority, yung sinasabi ko rito, yung plunder law. Na hindi na kailangan 50 million ang nakawin nyo bago kayo makasuwa ng pandarambong. Dapat kahit 1,000 lang ang nakawin nyo, dapat pandarambong na rin ang ikaso sa inyo. Okay, ha? Nako, umpisa na rito ang mga Senate hearing natin. Panoorin na natin ito, Diyos mio Marimar, parang nagkakabakbaka na sila rito. Parang bakbaka na. Okay. Ano, magtatapik na ba tayo o manonood tayo ng Senate hearing? Ano, magta-topic ba tayo o topic na lang? Wag na tayo mag-Senate hearing? Nako, delikado yan. Ano itatopic natin? Sige, maghanap tayo ng topic, ha? Maghanap tayo ng topic. Hindi ako prepare, sa totoo lang, hindi ako prepare, Pero, pag-usapan naman natin si Speaker Martin Romualdez. Pag-usapan naman natin kasi namigay daw siya ng ayuda diyan sa Davao. Nagbigay ng ayuda diyan sa Davao ang ating House Speaker. Ay, Diyos mio, Marimar. Diba, kailangan malaman niya ng mga... Ay, nako. Ano ba to? Ano ba ito? Bakit namimigay ng food cart? Ay, Diyos mio, Marimar. Usapang politika. Nako. Ay, dito tayo kumuha kay SAS. Kay SAS tayo kumuha. Ay, nako. Ano ba yan? Diyos mio. Nako. Andali lang, ha. Hindi tayo prepare, Nako. Wala. Nasa na yun? Okay. Namigay si Tamba ng food packs, may pangalan niya. Tingnan natin, pambira naman kayo. Siyempre, anong sabi dito? Panoorin, tingnan lang natin ito. Ito ba yan? Hindi ito yun sandali, nasa na yun? Share screen. Mag-topic tayo. Hindi ako Hindi ako updated eh. Nagpahinga tayo, pambihira tayo. O eto. O si Martin Romualdez, putang na, may dala-dala pang food cart to. O palakpakan natin ha, may dala-dalang food cart si Martin Romualdez. Ang laki ng pagmumukha niya dito. Diyos mio. Ayan no. O ha? O ano pa? Nagpakain. O. Haba ng pila. Pero panoorin muna natin ang title nito. Ano ba sabi dito? Thank you, Speaker Romualdez, patuloy na tulong, pondo at food packs para sa mga biktima ng baha sa Davao Region. Ibinigay ng tanggapan ni Speaker Martin Romualdez at Tingog Party List. 21,000 food packs at 150 milyong pondo. Ipinadalang tulong ng Tingog Party List sa pangunguna ni Congressman Yedal Romualdez at Congressman Jude. Oh, sino ba yan? Okay, ayan o. Nagpalabas din ang liderato ng Kamara ng 150 milyon na pondo bilang financial assistance para sa mga pamilya. Nako, palakpakan natin. Palakpakan natin, 150 milyon. Yan pakain yan food cart yan haba ng pila. May mga dalang plato. Ano, putang ina, lugaw. Ano ba ito? Lugaw, sopas. Putang ina, dilawan ng galawan, animal. Dilawan ng galawan. Di mo pera yan. Hindi nyo pera yan ng mamamayang Pilipino. Wag tayo mag-ululan dito. Eto pa, hanapin pa natin tong isa. Meron pa ako rito eh. Animal talaga eh. Nasa na yon? Naku, sino ba to? Ito. Ano ba ito? Yung pa rin. Ang sabi rito, naku, ito. Yan, Nagkaisa sina Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez at naku, bakit ganito? Bakit puro Tingog Party List at Speaker Martin Romualdez? Basahin nga natin ang mga comment. Gusto ko lang magbasa ng comment, huwag kayong magulo. Ano ba? Ang mga comment nila rito, bakit ang sasama ng mga ugali ng mga inayupak na ito? Ano sabi dito? Alam na this. Bakit ang dami-dami nag-comment dito? Bakit hindi mabasa? Most relevant, all comment, basahin natin. Yon. Ano sabi ni Ruben Balina, naning ka na si Tamba, baka matalo sa distrito niya. Goodbye Malacanang, agoy. Salamat sa pondo ng bayan. Sabi ni Hector Directo. Pakitang tao kung di pa sana alam ang mga karakter ng Pilipino mo. Hindi pa alam ng mga Pilipino ang karakter mo, maniniwala kami. Nako. Wag na natin basahin, parang puro pambabash naman ito eh. Maganda na nga ang ginagawa ni Speaker Martin Romualdez, binabanatan pa ninyo. Istoryahe, luso mo, tambaluslo. Bakit ganyan ang mga comment? Nasasama ng mga ugali talaga ng mga Pilipino. Huwag ganon. Nako, mahirap yung ganyan. Kaya nagagalit ang mga vlogger ng mga ni Martin Romualdez kasi pinakain na nga kayo, binigyan na nga kayo ng food packs. Pagkatapos itinitira nyo pa, anong klase ba naman kayong mamamayang Pilipino kayo? Grabe kayo. Diyos mio Marimar. Hindi na kayo nakontento. Kayo na binigyan kayo pag ulit. Ano ba ito? Sino ba nag-send nito? Ano ba ito? Oh, ano to? Ano sabi to? Ano to? Ba't ano tong meron dito? Baga kag ug simog tamba. O, kriset. Yan po natanggap ko. 3 kilo of rice and 4 pieces of meatloaf. Oh, makatanggap ka, ayaw mo pa? Nakatanggap ka na nga, ayaw mo pa? O, binigyan ka ni Martin Romualdez ng 3 kilo ng bigas at 4 na pirasong lata ng meatloaf. Ayaw mo pa niyan? Ha? Ayaw nyo pa niyan? Bakit naman? Ang sasama naman ng mga ugali ninyo. Bakit kayo ganyan? Ha? Ano sabi? Mas mahal pa ang bag na nilagyan. Pwede namang gawing simple, mas tipid, mas marami. Mailalagay nasa loob. May komisyon siguro ang printing shop. Naku, wala. Wala, magagalit. Magagalit ang ano niya, wag kayong ano. Mabuti pa sa Davao City, daming sobra na ipinamigay sa mga biktima ng baha. Kahit di nabahaan, yung iba nabigyan. Hay nako, may plano talaga si Martin. Kumanta. Ano ba yan? Ano ba yan? Magpasalamat na lang kayo at meron kayong biyaya galing kay Martin Romualdez. Nako, pambira kayo. Pag wala, nagagalit kayo, walang binigay. Ano na naman to? Bakit? Buti pa dito sa Bigan, walang nakalagay na politikong pangalan. Sa mga ayuda, madami pa. Bakit naman kinukumpara mo naman ng Bigan dyan kay Martin Romualdez? Baka naman sariling pera ni Martin Romualdez ang ginastos niya dyan. Huwag kang ano. Baka naman hindi pera ng gobyerno yan. Baka naman hindi taxpayer money yan. Baka naman pera sariling pera ni Martin yan. Ano naman kayo, huwag kayong ganyan. Anong malay ninyo, di ba? Patay. Kayo na nga binigyan eh. Ano ba naman yan? Sus Mariosem, napaka ano nyo naman. Ito naman, makakomment naman ito si Jun Besmonte. Epal 101, Tambaloslos. Anong sabi? Diyos mio, Marimar. Ano ba to? Biktima ng baha sa Davao, tinulungan ni Romualdez. Romualdez, sumaklolo agad sa Davao. Flood victim. Ha? Kailan yung balita na yan? Nakaraang araw lang yan. Samantalang ang baha dyan, 3 linggo na ang nakalilipas. 3 linggo na ang nakalipas, animal yan. Bakit ngayon lang kayo dumating dyan sa Davao? Huwag kayong ano, ha? Huwag kayong ano. Oo, pagpasalamat na lang tayo at mayroong isang Martin Romualdez na handang tumulong. Di ba? Magpasalamat. Iboto nyo si Martin Romualdez para pag-asenso lalo ni Martin. Gay, nako. Sabihin na naman nila, ikaw, Buster, wala ka naman na itutulong. Buster, ikaw na lang kaya tumakbo. Tumakbo ka kaya ng congressman o presidente sa susunod na eleksyon. Total, napakagaling mo naman, Buster. Ang tanong, ang dami nyo nagsasabi. Magaling ka pala, tumakbo ka, bakit iboboto nyo ba ako? Kapatakbo kayo ng patakbo sa akin bilang isang politiko, iboboto nyo ba? Iboboto nyo ba ako, mga tambaluslos kayo? Yung mga nagsasabi dyan, Buster, kung grabe ka makapuna, tumakbo ko kaya sa susunod na eleksyon. Tanginay mo, pag ako tumakbo, kailangan iboto mo ko. Ang tanong, rehistrado ka ba? Botante ka ba? Animal ka? Animal, buwisit kayo. Ano pa bang may babalita natin dito? Diyos mio, Marimar, ano bang meron dito? Ano ba itong mga pinaghandaan ko dito? Nako, puro naman to baha. O mga baha sa Caraga, sa ano. Puro naman ito baha. Oo, kaya ang alam nyo, kaya gustong humiwalay ng Mindanao eh. Kaya gustong humiwalay ng Mindanao sa bansang Pilipinas dahil yung lagi silang napag-iiwanan. Sa totoo lang marami na pag-iinawan na bayan kagaya ng mga liblib na lugar. Diyan lang sa Mindoro napag-iiwanan na rin ang Mindoro. Lalo-lalo naman ang Mindanao, samantalang ang Mindanao, napakalaki ng pakinabang nila dyan. Yung nangyari mga flash flood dyan, pagbaha dyan, gawa yan ng mga ng mga minahan eh. Sino ba ang nakikinabang sa mining? Di ba national government? May napupunta ba dyan sa region na yan? Sa local government, dyan sa mining na yan? Ang nakikinabang dyan, national government. Pero ang sakuna, ang dilubyo sa local government. Di ba? Ano ba ang mga napapakinabangan nila sa Mindanao? Ano-ano ba? Ha? Ano-ano ba ang napapakinabangan nila sa Mindanao? This is Mindanao. O yan. Ito ang Mindanao. Okay, lakihan natin. Ang Mindanao ay 1/3 ng bansa na total land area ng bansa. Meron itong 300,000 kilometer. Ang populasyon ng Mindanao ay 25.5 million. Ang Mindanao ay nagko-contribute ng 40% ng national food requirements. 40% ng national food requirements dahil napakalawak ng Mindanao, nandito lahat ang mga taniman. Noon nga nung wala pang climate change, bihira nga dalawin ng bagyo ang Mindanao. Ang madalas dayuhin ng bagyo natin, Bicol region. Dahil may climate change na ngayon, pati Mindanao ngayon, binabaha na at binabagyo. Napakalawak ng lupain ng agrikultura diyan sa Mindanao. Kaya nga tayo ang number 1 producer dati ng mga exporter ng mga ng mga prutas Tayo ang number 1 exporter ng saging, ng pinya, at ng tubo ng kung ano-ano pa. Ang Mindanao ang nagbibigay ng 40% na pagkain sa buong Pilipinas. Tapos karamihan na importasyon na. Karamihan na dyan na sa Mindoro, sa norte, dyan sa Benguet, dyan sa Ifugao, dyan. Sa Nueva Ecija, yung palayan dyan. Pero 40% ng food requirements nanggagaling sa Mindanao at yung food trade natin ay 30% galing dito sa Mindanao. Yung food trade natin, yung mga ini-export natin, yung mga saging natin, lahat yan, galing yan sa Mindanao. Pagkatapos, ang nakukuha lang ng Mindanao sa mga total national budget ay 12 to 16% lamang. Talaga? 12 to 16% lamang na kinikita ng Mindanao ang napupunta sa kanila. Kunyari, magbigay sila ng 1 billion o 100 million. 100 million sa national government. Ang babalik sa kanila, 12 million hanggang 16 million lang. Anak. NC Cover, magandang umaga, NC Cover. Ganyan ang Mindanao. Oh, ano-ano mga high value crops na nasa Mindanao? 99% ng rubber, 99.99% ng rubber production ay galing sa Mindanao. 90%, 90.82% ng palm oil, yung mga ginagamit natin mga cooking oil dyan, mga poking oil dyan. Dito sa atin yung ginagamit natin, 90.82% galing ng Mindanao. Yung kakao natin, yung kakao, yung ginagawang tsokolate, 89% galing Mindanao. 88% ng pineapple production sa buong Pilipinas ay galing lahat sa Mindanao. Yung pagbanana, yung kinakain mong saging dyan sa Luzon, 82% niyan galing lahat sa Mindanao. Ganyang kayaman ang Mindanao. Pagkatapos putang ina, pagka may sakuna, may dilubyo, may kung ano-ano, kabaha, lindol, ang ayuda, huli ang Mindanao. Sinong Mindanawan ang hindi magagalit at hindi gugustuhin na bumukod? Dahil lahat ng kinikita nila, lahat ng mga production nila, kinukuha ng gobyerno, ng national government, at kakarampot na lang ang naibabalik sa kanila. Ha? Ano na nangyari? Anak, pag nangangampanya kayo, putang ina nyo, ang punta nyo, Mindanao. Pati mga butante. Pati mga butante. Kinukurap ninyo. Pinapangakuan nyo ng kung ano-ano. Anak ng pusang gala. Tapos, etong mga taga-Luzon, kung makapag-down sa mga tao sa Mindanao, wagas. Kung makaganon. Galit na galit sila sa mga racist sa ibang bansa, racist sa Asian, samantalang dito sa sarili nating bansa sa Pilipinas, racist din sila sa mga Mindanawan. Diba? Pinaglalaban ninyo, putang ina, anti-racist kayo. Kasi pag inaapi kayo sa Pilipinas, ay sa ibang bansa, sasabihin nyo, racist ang Amerikano, racist ang European, racist ang mga ganito. Pero sa sarili ninyong bansa, racist kayo sa mga Mindanawan at sa mga Bisaya, lalong-lalo na etong mga taga-Luzon. Diba? Oh, wag nga tayo mag-ululan dito. Nung palagkaroon lang ng tayo ng presidente na mula sa Mindanao, medyo nakaahon-ahon ang Mindanao. Kaya lang, ayaw lang ni PRRD na masabihan na porket siya ang presidente ay buhos ang tulong sa Mindanao. Kailangan equal. Lahat ng tulong mararamdaman ng bansa, ng bawat rehiyon. Hindi siya nag-focus mismo sa Mindanao. Sasabihin nila, bakit nung naging presidente si Duterte, bakit hindi niya napaganda ang Mindanao? Di ba? Nasabihin nila, bakit nung naging presidente siya, hindi niya naman napa-asenso ang Mindanao Tangina nyo, bakit? Meron bang presidente rito na naging presidente natin na umasenso ang bayan nila? Si Ferdinand Endralin Marcos Sr. Napa-asenso niya ba ang Ilocos? Si Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, si Cory Aquino, dalawang Aquino, napa-asenso ba nila ang Tarlac? Di ba? Tapos sasabihin ninyo, 6 na taon naging presidente si President Marcos, ay si President Duterte, wala namang ginawa sa Mindanao. Tangina nyo. Ayan Ayan ang Mindanao. Halos lahat sa Mindanao nang gagaling. Wala pa dyan yung mining Wala pa dyan yung mga minahan. Wala pa dyan yung pagawaan ng sardinas. Dahil halos lahat ng pabrika ng sardinas nasa Zamboanga, nasa Mindanao. Meron bang paggawa ng sardinas dito sa Luzon? Nandun lahat sa Mindanao. Mariosip kayo. Kaya gustong humiwalay ng mga taga Mindanao Kaya gustong humiwalay ni PRRD. Diba? Kasi nararamdaman nila, napag-iiwanan sila. Ang focus ng gobyerno ay nandito sa NCR. Diba? Mariosip kayo. Ay bakit dito ba sa Ate Maribel G, maraming salamat good morning sa iyo Thank you. May pambili ko ng luya. Di ba? Bakit? Eto. Ano ang ambag ng NCR sa agrikultura ng bansa? Putang na, NCR nga pinakamalakas kumain NCR nga pinakamalakas umubos ng produksyon ng Mindanao. Diba? Kung sabihin ng mga taga Mindanao na putang ina nyo dyan sa Maynila, kung kayo sa amin, maka-degrade kayo sa amin, wagas, samantalang yung kinakain nyo galing sa amin dito. Diba? Kung hindi kami magbigay ng pagkain dyan sa Maynila, yung pagkain yung produkto na itinatanim namin dito, kami lang ang kukonsumo. Ano kaya mangyayari sa Maynila? Sige nga. Tapos puro pa kayo racist dyan. Di ba? Mariosip kayo. Ay Ate Maribel G, thank you Maraming salamat. Nako, pambili ng luya. Ito nga puro luya Di ba? Aasa kayo sa produksyon ng norte, ng Nueva Ecija? Putang na, sa lalakas nyo kumain. Di ba? Anak ng putang ina nyo. Ay nako. Anong oras na ba? Puta, ilang oras na? 1 oras lang ako magla-live 1 oras lang mahigit. Buti pa, Buster, pagmumurahin ng mga, ay, hindi, nasobrahan na nga nasobrahan na nga Nerlis TV, iba na naman ang pangalan mo. Diyos mio, diyan kami nasasaktan mga taga Mindanao di ba? Ano sa totoo lang, napakaganda ng Mindanao kung yung kinikita ng Mindanao sa kanila lang mapupunta at magagamit nila para sa kanilang mga pandagdag na produksyon, gamitin nila pang export, ibibenta nila o kaya panggawa nila ng infrastructure. Aba, ang Mindanao napakaganda, baka mapag-iwanan itong Luzon at saka Visayas. Di ba? Napakalawak. Kung makaikot lang kayo ng Bukidnon, papunta kayo ng tinatawag na South Cotabato, North Cotabato, nandyan lahat ng mga plantasyon. Ay, Diyos mio, Marimar. Di ba? Tapos makadegrade ang mga taga Maynila, napaka-racist, dyan sa mga taga Mindanao at Visayas, wagas. Samantalang ang kinakain nila galing sa Mindanao. Diba? Kagaya nito. Oh. Fruit basket. Mindanao, fruit basket of the Philippines. Luzon, Crocodile Park. Patay tayo dyan. Ano ko ba naman yan? Pekaps. Grabe naman yan. Nai-stress ka na at improvement not equal to mahal ng bilihin. Kaya nga Kaya nga meron may ipinapasa ang Senado 100 pesos dagdag na sweldo across the board. Ibig sabihin buong Pilipinas na kinokontra naman ng Kongreso. Ang sabi ng Kongreso, hindi daw napapanahon, kailangang pag-isipan, kailangan pag-aralang mabuti. Mas marami daw dapat na pagtuunan ng pansin kaysa diyan sa pagdagdag ng 100 piso sa sweldo ng mga manggagawa. Oo, yan ang sinabi ni Congressman Tambunting. Di ba? Sir, pwede po tanong kay Tambunting, isa siya sa meron pagmamay-ari, isa agency SMS, ang daming problema pagreklamo sa DOLE. Ito yung yung sinasabi na SMS, yung Tambunting Pawn Shop. Ayan ba yun na maraming nag-resign na hindi pinapasweldo ng ilang buwan? Ayan ba yun? Hindi ko alam yan Hanggang kailang matatapos ang kaguluhan sa Pilipinas? Wala akong idea dyan, Jose Latore, sa sinasabi mo. Oo. May mahogany laging company to. Tamo? Ay, sabi? Maganda ang Mindanao ever since. Kaso, kaya nga ito sinasabi nila, hindi daw pwede kasi magulo daw. Sinasabi ni sino yung nagsasabi na magulo daw ang Mindanao? Jam Magno ba? May mga nagsasabing vlogger na yung kaguluhan sa Mindanao, matagal na yan, ganito, ganyan. Ang tanong, sino ba ang nagsimula ng kaguluhan sa Mindanao? Sino ba? Diba kasi sinasabi nila marami daw rebelde, maraming terorista. Sino ba? Saan ba galing yung mga yan? Diba ang nag-umpisa ng kaguluhan dyan sa Mindanao yung mga oligarko, yung mga mayayamang elitista na pilit inaangkin ang mga lupain ng mga Mindanaoan, yung mga mayayaman. Kaya nagkakaroon ng mga rebelde. Merong mga naghihimagsik. lumalaban sa mga mapang-abuso ng mga oligarkyo at mga elitista? Sino ba ang nanggulo sa Mindanao? Di ba puro mga dayo? Kagaya ng mga pagmimina, sino ba ang mga may-ari niyan? Di ba puro mga taga saan? O, kayo na sumagot. Hindi naman Mindanaoan ang may-ari. Di ba? O. O, anong oras na? Paalam na tayo. Hindi na. Ipapagpatuloy ko to. Hearing na lang siguro. Hearing na lang. Oh, eto na. Panoorin na natin tong Senate hearing, ha. Panoorin na natin. Nako. Nasa na tong ano? Papahinga ko lang muna yung boses ko, ha.
I attach it to what I call the flavors of credible commitment. We know from the economics of contracts that when you have a deficit in reputation for performance, you break the spell by offering what is known as credible commitment. Those are facts on the ground that are costly to take back. In the Shogun era in Japan, daimyos or lords would have to leave their families in the capital as a bond that they are not going to rise up against the shogun in their far-flung hands. Newbies in a new car marketing offer longer repair or replacement guarantees to overcome reluctance with plunging unto the unknown. Now, I recognize the correctness of what Senator Grace and Supreme Court Carpio has told us. We have chipped away at some deleterious hurdles through some laws or amendments thereof, such as PSA and RTL. But laws are easy to reverse. The more credible signal of our commitment to be open is the lifting of the constitutional limits, since constitutional provisions are more difficult to change. We have been talking about changing the Constitution for over 40 years. Let me recall the worldwide excitement or to-do over the People's Republic of China's amending its constitution to legalize private property. So the more credible commitment, the better for investors. Urging the constitution of restrictions on foreign ownership can therefore raise the pool of and improve the quality of foreign investment, especially from those jurisdictions which have very strong rules against corruption, against contracting in corrupt practices. And it should lift the age-old impression that the Philippines is at heart suspicious of foreign investment. Now let me return to Article 12, Section 11, that is being discussed. This is a policy instrument, not a value, it's a policy instrument that framers thought may advance national welfare. The unspoken promise that native-born capitalists are better stewards of national patrimony than foreigners. But I propose that this is an article of faith. This is not a demonstrated fact. So we can debate how much DFI we lost as a consequence of Section 11 of Article 12. What is not debatable to me is how much it has cost us. In one particular case, consider the Terminal 3 Philippine International Air Terminals Company Incorporated, that's PIATCO, scandal. The construction of Terminal 3 attracted foreign interests, among them, of course, Fraport. But the ownership restriction on foreign ownership means that the foreign interest cannot own and run the facility. It needed a local partner to pose as majority owner. Some say a dummy. It found one and started constructing. But the local partner was embroiled in corruption cases, leading to lawsuits that caused completed Terminal 3 in 2002 to be mothballed for a decade since its delivery. In 2016, the Philippine Supreme Court, confirming an arbitral ruling, ordered the Philippine government to indemnify Piatco to the tune of about 25 billion pesos. That is a capital and interest, principal and interest. Had the ownership restriction not been there, Terminal 3 would have been run and earning since 2002, and the 25 billion indemnity would have been avoided. 25 billion pesos was the real cost of the foreign ownership restriction in just one case, in just this case. So I concur with the proposal to lift Section 11 of Article 12. And indeed, if you insist, indeed all other policy instruments such as CARP, masquerading as basic values in the 1987 Constitution. Will the lifting of these provisions create a tsunami of foreign and domestic investments? Well, we still have to solve problems of high power costs, high logistics, innumerable signatures, peace and order, and agricultural market distortions. Until then, only some improvement in the quantity, but probably more in the quality of foreign investment can be expected. It will not complete the pro-investment ecology that we need, but it will be a good start. Thank you very much and good day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fabella. We appreciate the discussion on opportunity costs that an economist would provide. We'd like to acknowledge our colleagues, Senator Nancy Binay, the Chair of the Senate Committee on Tourism. Morning, ma'am. Senator Francis Tolentino, the Senate Chair on the Committee on Science and Technology. Morning, sir. Next, we'll have another framer of the 1987 Constitutional Commission and Justice, I forgot. Also the Chair of Justice, Senator Tolentino. Formerly of Blue Ribbon, but he did not want that committee. So Dr. Braid, I think it's online. Can you hear us, Dr. Braid? Florangel Rosario Braid is one of the framers of the Constitution. Good morning, ma'am. Can you hear us? Narinig niyo po kami? Ma'am, you have the floor. Ma'am? Hi, ma'am. Can you hear us po? Maybe we'll ask the staff to liaise with her and we'll get back to her. We'll hear from Chairman Mike Aguinaldo. Morning, sir. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. I'm on Zoom.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you, Chairman. Go ahead po.
Thank you for the privilege of sharing some memorable moments in history 38 years ago. Our past two colleagues have ably discussed the present predicament, but I shall bring you back to the drafting of the Constitution, of specifically Section 11 of Article 2. As we know, I was asked to provide this update from these inputs from the past, and that where the Section 11 dealt primarily with just water, energy, but not telecommunication. So with the lobby of some of our telecommunication companies, we added telecommunications to public utilities. The it in this, as we know, the section it ensures that 60-40 ratio of ownership be given, not 60 in favor of Filipino citizens. No? But as we found out later, many of the current telecom operators had violated the agreement. No? Specifically, let me just cite, PLDT was summoned because of, I think, 63% ownership, foreign ownership, where the voting rights were given to foreigners and only about 37 to Filipino citizens. So this is anomalous, and so we hope that such practice will not continue. The amendment to this section was also to include all executives and managing officers shall be citizens of the country. We realize that maybe this phrase did not mean much in terms of voting rights, but it was a recognition of, past injustices, and also that many of the companies had brought in their own managing executives to the country. So I think the question I would like to address is why the acceptance. The past two speakers, I think we support each other. That we retain the provision on chapter 11, on chapter 12, on the 60-40 sharing, even a little more in favor of Filipino citizens. Why? Because the twin concept of national economy is patrimony, and if we take out the rights of our citizens, we lose our patrimony. So this is the reason why I think, and it's been emphasized in this article, that the concept of ensuring that our economy is owned by Filipinos, and that the exploration and development shall be undertaken under the supervision and control of the state, and that the state should undertake joint ventures only with Filipino citizens or companies, at least 60% of which are the capital of which are owned by our citizens. This is an apparent move, as we know, by the Foundation of Economic Freedom to amend at least nine articles on economics, on the economic provisions of the Constitution. But I trust that we not only retain Section 11, even the specifically referring to the phrase that states encourage equity participation in public enterprises by the general public, and that participation of foreign investors in the growing economy of any utility and enterprise shall be limited to their proportionate share of capital. And all managing and executive officers must be Filipinos. Now, going now to the present, to us, communication theorists and practitioners, we are alarmed by the fact that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation and fake news, and it is therefore extremely important to the state to protect its integrity, security, and national sovereignty. communication technology can be utilized for the common good, and it won't be possible unless you are vigilant. We can lose what most important to our survival, no? Which is our natural resources, as well as our integrity and sovereignty, especially now by allowing the continuing disinformation that could destroy our national fabric. I will not delve much into the importance of communication technology or the role of communication in creating disinformation, which is now probably one of the worst troubles of the country. No? So let us not focus so much on the lack of needed capital, which will come about if we are able to provide a more stable economic environment. So I would again plea about retaining 60-40 provision in the Constitution, and that we ensure that the other economic provisions of national economy and patrimony be honored, as our future depends on a strong state, strong nation that is built on Filipinos who love their country. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Braid. Next, Chairman Aguinaldo. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honors. Thank you for the invitation. I was specifically asked to comment on the proposed amendment to Article 12, Section 11 of the 1987 Constitution on public utilities. Again, I must stress that I'm looking at this from the lens of a competition authority. And ordinarily and generally, removing barriers to entry is good for competition. But I say that also as a theoretical for two reasons. First, if you look at the proposed amendment, it says unless otherwise provided by law. So that means that it depends on what the law will be crafted should the amendment push through. So it depends on what the law will say. Will it allow portfolio investment in these industries, or will it limit it to foreign direct investment? Will it limit it to companies that have a track record in that particular industry, or will they allow just any foreign entity to enter? So there are a lot of variables that can only be threshed out. And so that's why I say it's theoretical at this point, because we don't know what that will be. In fact, when you say unless otherwise provided by law, you could actually even increase the percentage, from 60 to 80, So a lot of it depends, and that's why it's theoretical. Secondly is, when you talk about effects of competition, you are looking forward. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. Okay, so recently we've had the PSA amendments, we've had retail trade liberalization, I think the second time already. And so you would only know the effects on competition from the implementation of these laws. And I guess at this stage, it might be a bit too early, especially for the PSA, since it's quite new. So that's why we would say in a theoretical level, yes, it would be good, but decisions are not based solely on competition principles. There are other principles that are involved, other things that you also have to look at. So I guess from a competition standpoint, in theory, yes, it would be removing barriers to entry would be favorable to competition. Yeah, thank you.
Very much, Chairman Aguinaldo. Now we'd like to hear from Dr. Carlos, and after that, the Chambers of Commerce, and then Dr. Angeles, Attorney Ocampo, Dr. Santos, and Mr. Francisco, the President of BDO Capital. So, Dr. Carlos, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I was taking down notes earlier as I listened to Senator Poe and Senator Ontiveros, and I'd like to address the issues that they have raised. I think I'd like to take off from the point of view of a social scientist who's looking at this from a macro standpoint. So I will not go into the nitty-gritty because all my colleagues here have already addressed many dimensions of the issue. I think the first question of Senator Grace is, do we need to change the constitution to declare that we're open for business? And the quick and dirty answer there would be no, because you already are making so many legislative actions to open up the economy. But I think the challenge there is it opening up enough, or are we addressing really what we want to happen? Here, I'd like to go into a bit of epistemology, if you don't mind, which is, when you establish something and you say that you know something, that means you have identified the composite of variables which will bring about a particular result, isn't it? Now, here, as I listen to the very intelligent comments around the table and those who are joining us virtually, and I noticed that we are not able to categorize our variables into most critical, less critical, and so on. In other words, we don't have an ordinal list where one is first, second, etc. And that one, as I agree with Dr. Fabella, cannot be an article of faith. It has to be empirically grounded. So however much we believe in these things, as a social scientist, if they are not empirically grounded, ay laway lang po yan. Okay, so I think because all the senators have their own research component, I would like them to pay attention to grounding all these claims. It's only if we have the hard evidence, the evidence conditions that will support them, that we can declare that we know something. That's the reason why you'll notice we're shooting here, there, and everywhere. It's because we're not able to categorize them into the most important, less important, etc. Okay, of course, remember I've been part of the cabinet for X number of months as National Security Advisor. One of the things I put together there would be to present to our president in one cabinet meeting, I think it was late October or early November, a national strategy. Why do we need a national strategy? And this is where I had, had to cross swords with one of my colleagues, Dineda had. Sabi niya, ba't mo pa kailangan national strategy? Andiyan na nga yung NEDA plan, sabi ko. Dinuro ko din siya, sabi ko, bakit naman sa national plan mo wala man lang isang single line about national security? And because I was the vice chair of the NTFL also at the time, bakit wala man lang dyan nakatutok tungkol doon sa mga barangay natin at anong gagawin dito sa mga natitira pa na mga influence barangay? Wala talaga doon yan. I mean, i-google niyo yan at saliksikan niyo yan. Okay, what am I saying? If we're just shooting here, there, and everywhere, and we don't have anything, a big picture that will crochet together, that will stitch together all these things, then we don't know what to do. In terms of konti na nga ang salapi mo, kung saan mo pa nilalagay. Dapat the national strategy ka. Pag konti ang salapi mo, alam mo, ito yung number one, yun ang una mong bigyan ng pansin. Ganun din siguro dito, no? Bakit tayo masyadong nagre-rely sa foreign investment? What about domestic investment? Hindi ba natin nakita yung sinabi na nga, yung regulatory framework, sinabi ni Dr. Villegas kanina, kahit ang inyong mga domestic investor, ay sinasakal din ng over-regulation ng ating gobyerno. Parang ang unang assumption mo ikaw ay magnanakaw, saka mo na i-prove otherwise, no? Bakit ganon? In other words, we are so much banking in foreign direct investment. We should also bank on our local investors and talagang bigyan niya sila ng alagwa para talagang magawa nila ang kanilang ginagawa. Bigyan ko kayo ng example, no? My former boss here, Senator Tolentino at the MMDA, I was there with him since 2010 as one of his consultants for the traffic management. Dinas namin, Senator, I don't know kung nakwento ko na sa ito, kung paano yung bureaucracy natin as been identified by other resource persons, no, is really one of the major obstacles to why no investment is coming in. Merong isang gripo dyan na nagtutulo, no? So sabi ko, ang bilis na, ang madali naman bumili ng gripo, parang 200 pesos lang. Sabi ko, sundan natin kung paano magbili ng gripo. Alam niyo ba kung gaano yun? 4 na buwan. I-raise namin ito, Senator Tolentino, 4 na buwan at 26 signatures para po makabili ng gripo. Gusto ko lang to make the point na the bureaucracy really matters. You have a Byzantine bureaucracy And I have seen posts of foreign investors telling you that there are two major things, critical variables that matter to them, are Byzantine bureaucracy and the level of corruption. Yung ownership ko, that they don't matter. By the way, tama si Dr. Fabella. Ownership by Filipinos is an article of faith. It doesn't matter who owns it. Sabi ko nga sa telco, kahit galing pa siya sa Jupiter, basta magpagawa siya talaga ng internet, okay lang. Does ownership matter? No, not anymore. In the university, we're telling our students, we're training you to be citizens of the world. We are breaking down all the boundaries of the artificial nation state. We already made commitments in ASEAN for regional integration. Why, for heaven's sakes, I was always so preoccupied on, keeping the nation state. It's one of the scourges of humanity, if I may say so. So, last point, yung Filipino first po, tama po si Senator Antiveros. Pasayin na po yan, it should be rendered obsolescent, no? Bakit Filipino first? Because once upon a time in the past, we tried to, to divest ourselves of all the colonial things that chained us, no, to the former colonial rulers of our country. Wag na po tayong Filipino first. No one study I have seen thus far has demonstrated quite creditably that ownership by Filipinos work. I challenge anyone here around the table, the social scientists. Meron bang ganyan? Wala po. Ownership doesn't matter. But what we really want is, in fact, I had suggested in one of my papers that if our economic managers cannot, in fact, lower or eradicate the 21% of their privileges na sinabi mo, no, na mga poor, mag-hire tayo po ng international group of economic managers. We pay them depending on the percentage of increment that they are going to contribute to GDP. I know this is an iconoclastic viewpoint, but for God's sake, we have to be iconoclast now. We are the fifth most mineralized countries in the world. We have millions of professionals. We should be embarrassed that we have 21% who are poor. Tama ba, Dr. Villegas? Tama, di ba? So I think, let me go back to the issue of a national strategy. I address this also to the military. Several times they have asked me to help them design their strategy for the Air Force, for the Philippine Marines, etc. Sabi ko, saan ba kayo nakatukod yung strategy nyo? Meron bang National Defense Plan? O bungang isip nyo lang yan? Saan manggagaling yung National Defense Plan, Senator ko? Hindi ba manggagaling yan sa National Strategy? Dibuho yan eh. It's a big, big picture. And siguro lastly, sorry sa Senator Angara, medyo nagsasobra na ata ako sa time ko. Senator po, you mentioned something about banning certain countries from ownership. And are you referring to China?
In the Public Service Act, any country that the President or the National Security Council views as a threat to us is actually eliminated from or banned from owning certain critical infrastructure, telecommunications, for example, I believe airports, etc. And also countries that don't reciprocate or allow us also the same type of ownership in their country would not be allowed. That's one. Those are some of the safeguards we put as a compromise to those who are a little bit wary about this Public Service Act being open.
Yeah, with all due respect, I agree with the reciprocity, but the first one I don't. Because if you have a strict regulatory framework, then it can be to whom it may concern. So I think we should not ban XYZ, whichever country. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Senator Risa, yes?
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Just a quick correction for the record. With all due respect, I certainly did not say that Filipino first is a passé policy. In fact,
One of the resource persons, I stand corrected.
Thank you, ma'am. In fact, I believe that Filipino first is a positive and dynamic principle in formulating and constantly updating our economic policy. And lastly, Mr. Chair, at this point, if 60 to 100% ownership in Filipino hands doesn't matter anyway in the big picture, then let's keep that in Filipino hands and work on the real problems identified both by those opposed to and supportive of RDH 6. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Risa.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment.
Yes, Senator
I'd like to thank also Dr. Carlos for bringing up something that we haven't really discussed in our minds being focused on foreign direct investments. It's true, local businesses are also suffering. What we're trying to do is we're actually hunting in the zoo, like the ones that are complying with the laws, paying taxes, are the ones being audited, while the ones that are in the informal economy getting away with so much, we don't focus our attention on. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Senator Risa, Senator Poe. It's definitely, we're not abandoning the Filipino first. In fact, Congress just passed the Tatak Pinoy strategy, which is an attempt at industrial policy, albeit somewhat belated for the region. No?
Sponsored and authored by our chairman.
Thank you for the salamat sa patalastas. Thank you. Thank you. We'd like to
just make a final comment. As a social scientist, I'd like an article of faith to have empirical evidence. We cannot work on an article of faith. Filipino first policy should be rendered obsolescent.
Thank you. Thank you for your opinion. We'd like to hear from Mr. Julian Payne, the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, who's been our guest in the past for the CREATE law and the other investment laws. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honorable senators. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce. Then I will make one brief comment on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And I have some colleagues here from the European Chamber and the Australia and New Zealand who may wish to add some. First of all, we thank the subcommittee for inviting us to comment on this resolution. We're honored to respond to the committee. The Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce of the Philippines is a business advocacy coalition. We know that. It supports and promotes open international trade, free investment, and improved conditions of business. That's what we advocate. We don't advocate anything more. That's where we focus. The Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce supports the easing of restrictions on foreign direct investment wherever this is possible. And I'll make a caveat to that in a moment. We are of the opinion that the removal of economic restrictions would facilitate increased foreign direct investment in sectors where such investment is currently restricted. We recognize that the government's mandate and indeed duty in all countries is to protect national interests through some restrictions on FDA. That happens in every country. In this respect, we note that most national economies, this interest is protected by use of legislation or executive action, not in constitutions. The advantage of using legislation or executive action is that with these forms of regulation, both the legislature and/or the executive can quickly adjust to changing business conditions and the international environment. Whether this is required by changes in technology, treaties, or just new opportunities for business. In recent years, the Congress, in its wisdom, has done just that with respect to amendments of the PSA, the Foreign Investment Act, the Retail Sales Legislation Act. Our neighbor country, Indonesia, opened more than 200 sectors to foreign investment, again by the same technique. We have noted various past proposals to remove constitutional restrictions to foreign investment, including removing these altogether, or as an alternative, to insert the phrase, unless otherwise provided by law, as proposed by the resolution, for sectors advertising, basic education, and so on. This second alternative provides the Congress the power to adjust restrictions as it deems necessary. While the second alternative may not be as strong a signal to foreign investment as the first, it makes possible, if the Congress so decides, to further ease restrictions or not, that would facilitate foreign direct investment. The Philippine economy is now more integrated with the global economy than it was over 30 decades ago. The country has joined the WTO, the ASEAN Economic Community, and RCEP most recently. It has free trade agreements with Japan, Korea, European Free Trade Association, and will probably need to negotiate further FTAs, such as with the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific Partnership, to remain competitive and to exploit these opportunities for the Filipinos. for the Filipinos. Many of these developments emphasize the need for free movement of capital and a level playing field between foreign and domestic investors. And that gets to the core of the question of the economic provisions. That is the statement of the JFC. I would like to make one comment on behalf of the Canadian Chamber. It seems to us we have two questions before us, and they're quite distinct. One is the question of restrictions in various sectors or not. This was made a point by Attorney Aguinaldo. It could range from 100% to 0% in any sector. The second question is quite a different one, is where are the restrictions going to be set? In the Constitution or in legislation? Now, the reality of the business world today is things are changing very rapidly. 30 years ago, we did not have online education. We did not have online advertising. The conditions have changed, and they will change faster and faster as we move forward. And I think it's imperative that the committee consider which is the most appropriate body to adjust to and propose restrictions, whether they be 100%, 60-40, or 0. There are two separate questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would ask whether my colleagues wish to add anything. Thank you. Salamat po.
Yes, Mr. Florian Gauteng, the Executive Director of the European Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Mr. Chairman, we're really honored to be here today, and especially we feel privileged as foreigners to speak here in front of this committee. Just to reiterate, basically, as European Chamber of Commerce, we fully support the statement that was just done by my colleague, Julian Payne. Again, just reiterating that amending the constitution is purely a Filipino matter, that we appreciate that we have been invited, and if the Filipino people decide to amend the constitution, we would actually be in favor of removing the economic restrictions from the constitution. If you look at, again, coming from what my colleague Mr. Payne said, if you look at recent amendments to PSA, to RTLA, FIA, but also the DOJ opinion on the implementing rules and regulations of the Renewable Energy Act, have really created a more conducive business environment for foreign investors to come in. And as you clearly can see also in the last 1.5 years, this has really opened the floodgates for foreign direct investments, in particular also coming from Europe when it comes to renewable energy projects. So you can really see that what is being done here in the Senate and the Congress has really a huge impact also then on how foreign businesses react to it. If I think it was earlier mentioned by Dr. Villegas, this will have the same impact on education and advertising. We don't know. Maybe it's more about the quality of investments there when it comes to education, to improve the level of education or the offer of education here in the country as well, because this is also critical for the competitiveness of the country, as well as then also for our investors here, to have qualified Filipino workers, especially also when it comes to new jobs, green jobs that we don't have yet here in the country. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, just as a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Gauteng. Yes, Senator Poe.
With the foreign chambers, when we passed the PSA, I believe you were quite jubilant about it, right? What's the feedback among in your community when we passed the PSA?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Madam Senator, it was a very positive feeling actually that, you know, after 80+ years, this law has finally been amended. And as I mentioned earlier, it really has contributed to the attractiveness of the Philippines among the foreign investors.
So did you see any improvement in terms of interest and actual investments that came in after it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can just give you the example of the European Chamber. We grew last year by more than 130 members. We are altogether 800 members, and just last year we increased our membership, new foreign investors coming in by 130 new companies.
Is there now concern because of this issue on amending the Constitution with regards to our foreign investors being a little bit hesitant because of the issues surrounding this now?
Well, I have to be honest, we got some calls from some of our members following the news and the political debate about how this might unfold or in which direction it could actually move further. So there is some uncertainty out there, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Duarte, would you care to add to that, or is that your position as well?
I represent the European Chamber as well, and I think my colleague Florian already stated. I might add one sentence, is that we are very honored to be here. We understand that is a Filipino debate, and we don't want to be, let's say, deeply involved in promoting solution A or solution B, but we are also very honored that we have the chance to put our positions. So, but in the sense that this could be an opportunity to awake interest from more foreign investment in the country, knowing that, and I hear we can talk for the European investment. So, for 100% investments in Southeast Asia, only 4% come to the Philippines, and we need to work together to increase this number, and everyone needs to contribute. The European Chamber from one side to attract, but also the country to accept and welcome foreign investment. So that's my just add on the topic. Thank you.
Well, that's a useful statistic. Thank you, Sir Duarte. Ms. Duar, care to say anything for the New Zealand and Australian Chamber of Commerce?
Same position as my fellow JFC colleagues as well. We are very supportive of coming into the country. Australia, New Zealand, especially Australia now has launched their economic strategic partnership for the next 17 years with Asia up until 2040. So we have also seen an uptick of Australian interest wanting to come over. So same position as Dan's. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very brief. Dr. Angeles, care to comment on the provisions we have?
And perhaps, Dr. Angeles has been a valuable resource during our public services bill hearing. And I would like to hear if perhaps he feels now compelled that we should open up other public services, public utilities, or are we okay so far with the PSA?
Yes,
please go ahead. Your observation.
Please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Honorable Chair and members of the committee and distinguished individuals in attendance. First, perhaps as regards, first I had the honor of working with Senator Poe and her colleagues regarding the Public Service Act amendments. That law was founded on what we believe to be the appropriate interpretation of the provision, that in fact public utility regulation was focused on the regulation of natural monopolies and their ills, and that the remaining most of the what were remaining sectors that were classified as public utilities in the Public Service Act amendments were considered to be natural monopolies. Those specifically that are considered by the economic literature to be still natural monopolies would be electric power transmission, distribution, water pipeline, distribution sewerage, petroleum distribution through pipeline specifically. And as I'm related to note that from the foreign chambers that this has been helpful. That said, I would like to address a few of the points mentioned earlier. While I understand that Professor Carlos believes that foreign equity restrictions are irrelevant, I would like to address that by 2 points. First, regarding the theoretical literature and empirical literature on control premiums. If, in fact, control was irrelevant, that control would not be worth a premium. And in fact, the financial economics literature has proven that there is in fact a control premium. Number two, on the theoretical aspects of the legal matters, certainly I think it's fairly well known that in corporation law that certain basic fundamental decisions must be taken with two-thirds vote of stockholders, such as amendment of articles of incorporation, as regards sale or substantial of all or substantially all of the business, etc. So these are matters which would be certainly important from a theoretical aspect. Now, from the empirical aspect, we have seen that with the Public Service Act amendments, in fact, there has been, and the renewable energy IRR amendments, there have been higher, there has been a higher interest in investment, and at the same time, pledges made, which I understand, as Professor Villegas has pointed out, have resulted in at least about $14 billion worth, and that has translated to, and a substantial portion of that was in renewable energy. Now, that said, I would say that, and I will confine myself specifically to the issue of public utilities, I would say that, as you mentioned, as the chairman and has repeatedly mentioned, uncertainty is something that is worth considering. And I think this is also mentioned by the Joint Foreign Chambers. Now, it cannot be denied that there are two pending Supreme Court petitions challenging the constitutionality of the Public Service Act. And while I believe that the Public Service Act amendments law will pass muster, that said, the Supreme Court still has the final, is in the end the final arbiter of the meaning of the Constitution and its metes and bounds. So for that reason, I believe that the amendment adding unless provided by law would be helpful in addressing the uncertainty which the chairperson has in fact pointed out. I also do agree with the good Senator Poe that there are a number of safeguards that our policymakers, our wise policymakers have added, which I think will help to mollify their concerns. One of them is the state-owned enterprise prohibition, which affects public utilities and critical infrastructure. As in fact, it was in fact asked in the last bar exam, not even 1%, there was a proposed 1% investment. But even under that state-owned enterprise prohibition, post-effectivity, there is no state-owned enterprise that can invest in public utilities and critical infrastructure. There, as you also mentioned, there's a reciprocity provision. And at the same time, there's an information security provision, which requires those engaged in the business operation of telecommunications to secure those relevant international certifications for information security, and prohibits cooperation as regards providing sensitive information, personal information. So if we are to so moving forward, I believe that there are quite a number of salutary provisions there that would help to mollify concerns for foreign investment in these sensitive sectors. May it please the members of the Honorable Committee.
Very much. A lot of useful points there, Dr. Angeles. Senator Poe, I think, wants to interject, and then Dr. Villegas is also raising his hand. So,
I'd like to address my question to our Justice Carpio, having been a member of the Supreme Court as one of the justices. As you know, the Public Service Act is now being questioned before the Supreme Court. And maybe that's also one of the reasons why our chairman here and some of our colleagues would like to strengthen the provisions of the Public Service Act by amending this through the RBH 6. What is your view on it, sir? Is there a legitimate reason why we should go through this process, or do you feel that the Supreme Court will eventually resolve it
soon.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
I'm in favor of
connected po
Is
dun
it
sa...
connected? With your permission, Justice Carpio? Senator Binay, yes.
Mr. Chairman, and would the passage of this resolution make the pending cases in the Supreme Court moot and academic?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Justice,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
yes, I'm in favor of the amendment to that we include in the economic provisions the phrase unless otherwise provided by law. But I would like to add subject to reciprocity, just like in the PSA, amended PSA. Now, on the issue in the Supreme Court, I think this would help. If you amend the provision now to add unless otherwise provided by, then that will settle the issue. Because, you know, the way I look at it, the interpretation of public utility is an interpretation reserved for the highest court of the land, because we are interpreting a phrase in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court will always say, we have that authority. Congress cannot decide a case by defining a provision in the Constitution the way they want it. We will say what that provision means, because that is judicial power. So the issue is, does public utility include transportation? Does it include telecommunication? For the longest time, that has been the case. And whenever we say of speak of public utility, we always mean transportation, telephone, and that is the way the framers of the Constitution understood it. So it boils down to who can interpret the Constitution finally, the Supreme Court, or can Congress interpret it by legislation? So that is the issue now. If I were in the court, I would say it's the Supreme Court who can interpret the meaning of public utility. But you will say, we will define public utility under a law. So there is now a conflict. So to settle that, just add there in the provision of the Constitution, unless otherwise provided by law. That would fix it. Because my position is the Supreme Court is the final interpreter of the phrase public utility. Because that is the reason for existence of the Supreme Court, to interpret the provisions of the Constitution. Congress cannot take that power away by saying, we will interpret it in a law. That's exactly the issue now in the Supreme Court. So I'm for this provision, but just to add the phrase subject to reciprocity, because we cannot open our economy to Vietnam, to China, to Indonesia, when they are close to us. I mean, it should be equal, because we are sovereign states. We should be treated like they're co-equals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Carpio. Tama yun, di dapat tayo magpadugi. Senator Tolentino, on a related point, with your permission, Dr. Villegas.
Chairman, germane to the question of Senator Binay. So in effect, it would be, the question was whether it would render the case moot and academic. The answer implies the proposition that it would have a retroactive, persuasive effect among the members of the bench. Is that the correct interpretation, Your Honor, Justice Carpio?
You add the phrase unless otherwise provided by law. That will solve the problem, because the Constitution itself tells everybody that you can now determine the meaning of public utility.
But the PSA amendment was passed prior to this process. So will that have a bearing on that? If the Supreme Court would release its decision within the next few months, and if looking at if there is a timetable, sans bullying, this would be addressed by a plebiscite within the next few months, how would that jive with the persuasiveness?
Well, I have no idea when they will decide that case. So
But for me to play it safe, it will be better to put the phrase unless otherwise provided by law. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice.
Thank you very much, Senator. Back to you, Dr. Villegas.
Yes, I'd like to emphasize the importance of what Mr. Payne asked. Should restrictions, Filipino first, which will always be relevant, be in the Constitution, or should they be legislated? And I'd like to give you a background about why those of us who drafted the Constitution really made our Constitution a series of legislation. I'm the first one to say that sooner or later, we have to amend this very imperfect Constitution of 1987.
That is a very important question, so I would love to hear from you, sir.
Because 1986 was not the appropriate time to write with serenity, peace, and quiet the basic law of the land. The whole nation, including us, were traumatized by the last turbulent years of the dictatorship, and not to mention the revolution. So emotions were high, and the idea was, let's produce a document that will make sure that the dictator will never come back. And so our Constitution is really an anti-Marcos Constitution. And we jam-packed it with so many provisions that you will not find in most basic laws. And that is why one day I would like to see this Constitution amended. The question right now is timing. I'm of the opinion that now is the time. But sooner or later, we must revise and remove all those restrictions and make sure that in a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, we give the legislature precisely the freedom to be flexible. So we will always debate about Filipino first, restrictions, and they will always be necessary. But the question is, should they appear in the basic law of the land?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Nancy, yes.
So, Dr. Villegas, parang today is not the right day to change the Constitution.
Yes, I already said why, because we have to first address the biggest problem. 21% of our fellow Filipinos are going to bed hungry.
When is the right time to do it, Dr.
I was saying, if the president is able to achieve those two targets, bring down the poverty incidence to single digit, which Secretary Balikasan is always saying, that by 2028, we will see a single digit. And how do you do that? I already mentioned, make sure that we increase the rate of investment to GDP to 30%. And you can do that only because of lack of local capital. This will not be always. Probably when we already are $10,000 capital, we will have enough capital to really implement Filipino first. But I'm talking about the circumstances today. We don't have the capital for Filipinos to invest long-term in these infrastructures. So my feeling is, because I'm optimistic that this administration will be able to achieve their target, probably by 2028. Make the plebiscite simultaneous with the national elections. And who knows, probably the next administration can tackle that issue. But I repeat, our Constitution of 1997 is a very imperfect one.
Thank you. That's a very, it's a humble and honest, frank assertion, because some people are tied to their work, but you're obviously not, and you're, as an intellectual, you've assessed it very honestly. We appreciate that, Dr. Villegas. I think this is the right time to insert some data we've received from the Senate Economic Planning Office, or the SEPO, of 18, because we're talking about whether these restrictions should be in the Constitution or in ordinary legislation. And according to the Senate, the SEPO, the Senate Economic Planning Office, of 18 countries surveyed, it is only the Philippines which has the economic regulations or restrictions on nationality in their constitution. The following do not: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and the United States. So these countries deal with these issues of nationality in their legislation and not in their constitutions. So that may be one of the reasons why many of those surveyed do not talk about the Constitution because it is irrelevant to their experience, Your Honors. So next we'll have Attorney Ocampo. Attorney Ocampo is a practitioner who for tax and corporate law who has lived in Kazakhstan and lived and practiced investment law in Kazakhstan and Cambodia and Vietnam. Or just Cambodia. Yes, please. We look forward to hearing from you, Attorney Jude Ocampo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And of course, I'd like to say I'm honored to be able to contribute to this discussion in two ways. One, as the Honorable Chair said, as a lawyer who's worked in other ASEAN jurisdictions and even in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. Second, also as a managing partner of a small law firm that works primarily with foreign investors. So as the Honorable Chairman said, I've actually worked in very exotic locations. So Kazakhstan, I was a tax advisor in Budapest in Hungary. And I've worked with a regional law firm, it's called TFDL. I did some work on Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam, taxation and investment. And what I hope to contribute is that in my observation, the decision of a company to invest in a certain location, it's almost the same everywhere else. So in, let's say, an American company, you would have what maybe we can call here a sponsor. It's one person in the company that thinks, okay, there's an opportunity in the Philippines. And then that company would normally also have an investment committee. And that sponsor, that person, will then go to the investment committee and defend his proposal to invest, say, in the Philippines or Vietnam or Cambodia. One of the things that is very important there is his defense of whether or not a certain hurdle rate would be met. So it's an investment rate that is based on the capital cost and borrowing cost of that company, right? So that person would say, yes, I will go. It would be higher than this certain hurdle rate. So let's invest in the Philippines or Vietnam or Cambodia or what have you. The next step usually is a legal study, what the investors call a market entry memo. In that market entry memo, law firms such as ours, we are asked, okay, what are the rules? How do we set up? If the investment goes awry, how do we exit? Is there a predictable legal regime? So that's the usual route. And then if the investment committee is happy, they do some final calculations and they put the money in, right? So I'd like to echo actually what the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Carpio said earlier, that among the things that impact investment is the efficiency of the bureaucracy. Because bureaucratic efficiency is actually among those that they factor into when they determine if they're going to be able to set up immediately, will they be able to set up easily? If they exit, will there be costs? The other issue would be on predictability. Because when they set that hurdle rate, when they calculate the hurdle rate, they make a lot of economic assumptions. And so a sudden change in the law or a sudden change in the interpretation by the Supreme Court of a law would put that calculation in danger. Again, also just my observation, it's this thing, it's the hurdle rate. It's whether or not the company will make more money than its cost of capital is the one that's important to these investors. So again, two things, it's bureaucracy and predictability, right? And at the risk of sounding like a fan of Justice Carpio, I'd also like to echo what he said about the PSA matter. as a matter of fact, I was also speaking with Dr. Angeles earlier about it. The problem really is that, yes, it was passed and it's a great piece of legislation. Our firm actually benefited a bit from the Public Service Act amendment and the change in renewable energy because those are our clients. And they were very enthusiastic when the Public Service Act was amended and when the DOJ and DOE revised the IRR for RE renewable energy investments. The other one, by the way, is the amendment on the Retail Trade Act. That one actually also created some excitement with the foreign law firms we work with and foreign clients. But going back to the PSA, I think during the time that it came out and we would have discussions, practitioners, on whether the challenge the Supreme Court or what's going to happen to this. I think many practitioners think that the validity would likely be confirmed, but there's always that risk that, as Justice Carpi said, it's a very important constitutional issue. Can the legislature actually define what's in the Constitution, or can the Supreme Court ignore that definition and look to other sources to determine what public utility is? And just to make sure that there's no such risk, it may be good to actually adopt the changes proposed as otherwise provided by law, or as Justice Carpi said, maybe you can include also reciprocity. In the end, with regard to the issue of whether or not the national ownership restriction should be in the Constitution, in the end, it's about trust. Do we trust future House of Representatives and future Senates to act responsibly and promote the national welfare when they prescribe these levels or threshold for Filipino ownership? So I think if there's something else that I would be able to contribute to this honorable committee, I'm happy to assist sometime in the future. But as of now, I think I can end my discussion there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Risa, yes.
Just a quick manifestation in response to one of the later points raised by Attorney Ocampo. Tingin ko nga, and this is related to one of the questions I'll raise when my turn comes later. Sa tingin ko po, sobrang critical nga na hindi lang ipagkatiwala, carte blanche, sa mga future na hindi pa natin kilalang mga kongreso ang ganitong ka-critical na usapin. Salamat, Mr. Chair.
I guess it's a debate about political maturity also, diba? If you don't give that power to institutions, then when do you become mature? If you assume immaturity. Dr. Villay.
No, that's a very important point. When we wrote the Constitution, who were we? 50 members of the Commission. Who would say that we are the only ones who can protect the Philippine welfare? It's, I think, unfair to say we don't trust the future. What about us? Do they trust us? Who are we?
I trust you, sir. I trust
No,
you.
no, no. But precisely when I was against so many of these restrictions, they would say, "Oh, we cannot trust the future legislature." But do you think we are trustable? We are trustable.
I think it's part of our journey to being a mature political democracy.
Exactly. So
How much power do we entrust to our legislators who are elected by the people, and they are our representatives at the end of the day, whether we like what they're doing or not. So that's where elections come in, and we make our choices. Yes, Commissioner Sarmiento.
There is mention by Attorney June about general welfare as a guide for legislators and lawmakers, and reference is made by Justice Carpio to reciprocity. There is a provision that will guide us actually in the article on the national economy, addressing these 2 points. It's in section 13 that provides the state shall pursue a trade policy that serves the general welfare and utilizes all forms and arrangements of exchange on the basis of equality and reciprocity. So this addresses or answers the question or the suggestion of Justice Carpio and the points raised by Attorney Chun. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much for pointing that out, Commissioner Sarmiento. Next, we'll have Senator Risa.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Just an additional brief manifestation. On the matter of trust and institutions, paalala lang sa atin na in the Constitution itself, there are well-defined processes to amend the Constitution itself, wide open for congressional and citizen participation. And again, these are also elements of that process of political maturation. Salamat, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Fabella is raising his hand. So, but before we recognize him, we just want to highlight that point of Commissioner Sarmiento earlier during his position paper, where he said that there are 11,000 amendments proposed to the U.S. Constitution over 200 or so years, and only 27 have been adopted. So, if we average it out, there are an average of 46 amendments proposed a year, and an successful amendment every 8.7 years. Just to, in the Philippines, since 1987, there have been, according to the House, there have been 358 proposed cha-cha measures or charter change measures over the last 37 or 38 years, which is roughly an amendment proposed once every 10 years. And this is, if we succeed, this will be the first amendment. So I guess if we're talking about political maturity, we have to ask ourselves, that is the process we're going through a part of our political maturity? Will definitely engaging in it, talking about it in front of our people in an open and transparent manner, nakakatulong yun sa ating taong bayan na karamihan, let's face it, hindi naman mahalaga sa kanila yung ating saligang batas. So I think in that sense, it is an educational process for our people. And I think this is the first time we've really gone in depth in terms of discussing the economic provisions, because we've been sidetracked by, often the discussion has not been focused, which is why this representation has really wanted to focus on the three provisions at hand. Although we welcome the opinions of our eminent personalities, because it's very rare that we have them all in the same room. So thank you very much. Dr. Fabella, can we hear from you, sir? You're raising your hand.
Thank you very much. This is on trust. And moving on from Dr. Villegas' manifestation about his idea, about his thinking of the Constitution, let me just comment that the 1987 Philippine Constitution, I think, this is, I'm not a constitutionalist in any way, I think fails the simple aesthetics of brevity on the separation of principles and instruments. The reason why the Philippine 1987 Constitution is rather lengthy is because of the inclusion of instruments rather than principles and values into the body of the Constitution. This section, for example, state policies, contains 27 sections, all of which, let me repeat, all of which constrain future governments in certain directions. What it tells us citizens is that the framers of the 1987 Constitution harbored a deep distrust for future governments, and that is including current generation, to act with prudence, and so their hands should be tied. But this also limits their capacity to respond to changing social, physical, and technological environments. In other words, resilience be damned. So there are provisions in the Constitution that are also economic, but which we're not going to include in the cha-cha. But I wish that they would be included. For example, the issue of land policy and the comprehensive agrarian reform program. Again, I reiterate the idea that laws are rather easy to reverse, and therefore it doesn't have the binding, credible commitment value of the lifting of the restrictions of the Constitution. The PSA may well be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, which is why it's best to have the lifting of the restrictions of the on foreign ownership in the Constitution. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fabella. Now we'll go to Dr. Emmanuel Doy Santos. He's with us online. He's based in Australia, and he's an advisor to the Australian government and local governments on political and economic matters. Dr. Santos, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
And honorable members of the committee and the Senate for this opportunity to shed light on the matter at hand. Next slide, please. If the slides are there. I have a slide presentation that I'll take you through.
There are actually no slides. Can we ask?
Oh, sorry.
Anyway,
I have prepared some remarks, so whenever they can load it there, I'll just take it from wherever it starts. So, good morning to you all. The 1987 Constitution, some general remarks first, Mr. Chair. The 1987 Constitution is only the latest in a long line since 1935 to contain restrictions to foreign ownership in its provisions. But the origins of these restrictions even predate that. The 1899 Malolos Constitution did not contain any restrictions to foreign participation in our economy. Ironically, by a strange twist of fate, it was the US annexation of the Philippines that caused these restrictions on foreign ownership to be inserted in the Philippine Organic Act of 1902. By the way, I have to state at the start that I am here in my private capacity, and my opinions are mine alone, do not represent that of my employer. Thank you. So, as a concession to the Democratic House members from the South in the US, fearful that cheaper goods, especially sugar, from the Philippines would flood US markets, American citizens and corporations were prevented from holding vast tracts of land, engaging in mining, banking, and utility franchises in the Philippine Organic Act. The US colonial government then sought to appease the Filipino revolutionaries by offering them land through land reform under Governor Taft. However, the Treaty of Paris required the US to compensate the Spanish friars for these lands that the Katipuneros had occupied during the revolution. This made the cost of owning productive assets unaffordable for most beneficiaries because the US Treasury made them pay for these costs. This is from a paper by Aaron Marr, because you can't see the slides yet, published by the Harvard Business School in 2008. As a result, Mr. Chair, land ownership became concentrated in a wealthy class of local principales, more concentrated among the top quartile compared to the Spanish era, meaning to say, land ownership became even more concentrated, perversely under the US attempt to engage in land reform between 1903 and 1918. From economic concentration of assets, Mr. Chair, to political consolidation of power in 1910, when the first elections of the Philippine Assembly took place, ANU professor Paul Hutchcroft noted that local elites gained national prominence from where they awarded franchises. And then in the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, this was cemented through the 60-40 rule. What started as a strange quirk caused by US domestic politics in 1902 led to a permanent fixture of increased protectionism. The only exception to this rule was granted to US citizens and corporations after World War II, which was the condition set for granting our independence. Now, although, Mr. Chair, it was considered a stain on our national sovereignty, the parity rights granted to US investors actually led to rapid growth in the 1950s, the highest rate of growth that the Philippines has experienced post-war. Through trade and monetary policies that biased the importation of capital, sorry. That's okay. I just got a message from the Secretariat. That's okay if there's no slides. Bias the importation of capital, intermediary goods for production over consumer goods. Hutchcroft notes that manufacturing expanded by double digits during much of the decade, and the value add by industry also increased. Under President Magsaysay, the Philippines privatized many of the state-owned enterprises set up in the aftermath of the war. After Magsaysay's untimely death, the Filipino First policy gave preferential treatment to locals in using import quotas. The result was that local businesses misused these quotas to import finished goods rather than capital goods, and so the consumer bias that was spoken of earlier began. The system was gamed and corruption ensued, leading to weaker growth, triggering a foreign currency crunch, which devalued the peso and led to slower growth in the 1960s compared to the 50s. This was the first boom-bust cycle, which halted our transition to a modern economy as agro exporters earned a windfall from the weaker currency, even as the industrial sector faltered. This led to social unrest and public clamor, which led to the convening of the 71 Concon, of which my father was a member, where more restrictions on foreign direct investments were introduced. This demonstrated that we had not learned the lessons from the debacle of the first Filipino policy. I'm on slide 10, by the way, for the Secretariat's information. Also, the US parity rights enacted in 1946 lapsed by 1974, so there were no more restraints on the nationalist agenda. Slide 11, please. In the 70s, the state took the lead in industrialization through sequestration and nationalization, relying on public debt to finance it. Slide 11. Oh, are we there? Yes. Leading to relying on debt to finance it. This created a bubble that became unsustainable. The change in regulation led to a precipitous fall of FDI in the late 70s and contributed to the economic collapse in the 80s and tepid growth in the 90s. We missed the first wave of Japanese FDI, which flowed instead to our ASEAN neighbors. UP School of Economics professor Noel de Dios attributes this to the perfect storm of our economic malaise, becoming the perennial sick man of Asia. Slide 12, please. Mr. Chair, contributing to this malaise, the sectors subjected to foreign restrictions were expanded further in the 87 Constitution. Next slide, please. This led Dr. Overholt of Stanford to comment that regardless of which regime was in place, the Philippines was constrained by an unholy alliance, quote unquote, of entrenched interests both from the left and the right. Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, the World Bank noted that foreign ownership is correlated with labor productivity and, might I add, higher wages. This is not only due to foreign capital, but transfer of know-how. Harvard professor Hausman, Ricardo Hausman, who I know you're familiar with, Mr. Chair, says that unlike tangible intellectual property, which can be codified or easily acquired, tacit knowledge is stored in the brain and not easily transferred. It is easier to transfer this kind of know-how by moving the brain itself, i.e. the person, and therefore it requires greater openness on our part to foreign participation in our economy for diffusion of innovation to take place. As you can see, the share of foreign ownership of firms in our country remains small. Next slide, please. The World Bank further notes that the economic concentration in the Philippines is higher compared to our neighbors, particularly in manufacturing, despite the 100% FDI being permitted there. Does it have anything to do with the fact that our energy is a key driver of the manufacturer's costs and that the 60-40 until very recently remained in place and remains in place for transmission and distribution? Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, the Philippines is rated highly restrictive to FDI by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. If you drop down into the weeds of their scoring system, you will find that it is due to the provisions in our charter mainly, which do not appear elsewhere, as you have already alluded to, Mr. Chair. I have provided the subcommittee with a spreadsheet on which these scores were based for its information. Next slide, please. We continue to see the results of this restrictiveness in our inability to attract foreign direct investment. The Philippines is unique in our region, comprised of former colonies, Australia and New Zealand included, or occupied countries such as Japan and Korea, for having these restrictions hard-coded in our constitution. Next slide, please. As a result, we've been overtaken by our ASEAN neighbors. Next slide, please. As a result, we have been overtaken by our ASEAN neighbors. Vietnam, next slide, please, being the latest to overtake us. Next slide, please. In 1985, we had 3 times their per capita income in Vietnam. But due to their opening up through the Doi Moi reforms of 86, while we were increasing the restrictions in our 87 constitution, Vietnam has finally overtaken us 35 years later in per capita GDP and minimum wages, may I add. Next slide, please. So, turning to RBH 6, which considers granting legislative fiat to regulate the ownership of public services, basic education and advertising, we might ask, why is it needed, Mr. Chair? As some members of the committee have asked already. Evidently, the PSA has not necessarily solved the problem. After removing electricity generation from the 60-40 rule through the PSA, which is still subject to court deliberations, renewable energy is considered one of our bright spots for investment. The problem is that our electricity grid and the lack of connectivity for commercial solar and wind power projects, which are in remote places, but closer to the consumers. Distribution is still subject to 60-40. As renewable energy increases its penetration in our energy mix, the upgrade of the grid is needed to handle variable energy, or else we will risk short-circuiting and blackouts as per what happened in Panay earlier this year. Existing legislation tries to manage this, but causes slower take-up of rooftop solar due to the higher associated costs. Ari Pesco, director of the Electricity Law Initiative at Harvard Law School, talks of a utility transmission syndicate in the United States, which prevents the integration of solar and wind and battery. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has tried numerous times to expand transmission capacity to capture new clean energy sources. This decades-long effort has been nearly an impossible task, he says, transforming a system of utility monopoly fiefdoms, Mr. Chair, into competitive marketplace. As Ari put it, what the FERC is trying to do is counteract the incentives and abilities of utilities to act uncompetitively. The problem is utility control and utility interest in maintaining the status quo. Utilities, he says, for the most part, inherently aren't against clean energy, but they deploy it at a place and scale that will benefit them. So, Mr. Chair, that is one argument that I would like to put forward. I have other slides, but I will leave it at that, as I believe that I have already exceeded my time at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
thank you very much. We appreciate the historical perspective, Dr. Santos. Can we hear from Mr. Ed Francisco, from the President of BDO Capital? Morning, sir. Or good afternoon, rather.
Good afternoon, sir, Your Honors. No, I just wanted to share my views. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I represent the banking industry, but in my case, I'm a practitioner. I daily speak to foreign and local investors. In fact, I'm the one talking to all the investors for the NAIA privatization. So I'm dealing for both foreign and local. Those are the long-term kinds of investors. I also deal with the short-term investors, or what, as Dr. Villegas talks about, the hot money, because the stock market, I also manage that, the business. So I'm doing 2 IPOs, so at least as my value add there is that I talk to the investors if they're willing to invest already. And basically, I guess I support what Dr. Villegas and Justice Carpio said. The PSA, the Foreign Investment Act, the Trade Liberalization Acts are great. And then Senator Paul asked earlier, there was really a lot of positive news from foreign investors who want to invest. They're dealing with me because they want to invest, especially in renewable energy. The big problem or the complaint they have is not naman the ownership limits. At least from a practitioner's perspective, their complaints are really more the bureaucracy, corruption, and red tape. Maybe just as an example, for the foreign investors we talk to in renewable energy, it's been reduced already, but it still takes 167 signatures for a project to get approved. So even if with the Renewable Act, with all this trade, I guess with tax benefits already, it just takes so long, and it takes around 5 years. So even if we're all in one, we want to have more energy, you want it cheaper, What's preventing the investors from actually getting their project is all the bureaucracy. So it's not naman the foreign.
Can I just, sorry, I don't usually interrupt my resource persons, but that is crazy. 167 signatures. I just wanted to put that on record. Yeah, that's crazy.
Your Honor, it's actually gone down. A few years back, it was 250. So nabawasan na, but unfortunately, 167 is really. I agree, sir. So that's the real bottleneck. There are many people who want to invest locally and foreign, even the large local conglomerates, but this is what they have to deal with. So I guess what I just want to say is that, yes, I also agree with the foreign chambers. Any changes to improve, I guess investments would be appreciated, but the lower hanging fruit or the things that can really be changed, sana, is more in the bureaucracy. If your honors can do something there, that would really help in us spur more investment. Thank you for that, sir.
Very much. We had a similar situation for telcos because they were complaining about the number of signatures needed to obtain or to put up a cell site tower. And in the Bayanihan 2 law, which we passed a few years back, we placed although it was time-bound, a time-bound sort of emergency provision to cut the signatures down. So I think we need to do that for just an offhand, just thinking offhand. Thank you, Mr. Francisco. Now, can we hear, thank you to our friends from the private sector. Now we have a whole slew of government agencies. We have the NEDA, USEC Rose Edilion, and USEC Crystal Uy have been waiting patiently, along with the DOF, the DTI, the POI, the PESA, the ICT, and the SEC. Begging your indulgence, can we hear from you, NEDA, USEC Edilion? Thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the eminent persons around this table. Thank you also for this opportunity really to discuss about this economic provisions in the Constitution. So as you know, the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 is about transformation. And I think part of the transformation is that we have to look at all those things that could facilitate that transformation. So there was a question on we have actually opened already our economy. The thing is, if you look at the OECD, they call it the restrictiveness index. So although this is still this is a 2016 document. Let me see. Sorry, 2019 document. So it talks about actually four aspects of this restriction. Just cannot find. Okay, four aspects of the restriction. The first one is to do with the foreign equity restrictions. The second one is to do with restrictions with respect to the screening, the discriminatory screening, where those coming from foreign investors are actually screened differently or are applied a stricter screening process. And then the third one has to do with they would say other aspects of restrictiveness, like with respect to let's say branching, with respect to they call it operational restrictions, like you cannot put up branches here, with respect also to ownership of land, and then the degree of transparency, and then the discretion with respect to the granting of approvals. And then the other one is with respect to restriction on foreign personnel. So with respect to this, looking at this these four, and looking at the countries, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam, Philippines actually comes out as the most restrictive. We will be submitting to the committee the restrictiveness with respect to certain sectors, because they looked at 22 sectors in all. And it would seem that the Philippines is most restrictive with respect to the primary sector: agriculture, fishery, forestry, mining, and quarrying. And then some secondary sectors as well, and also some tertiary sectors, which are on the services. So, and of course, you would say that there are other things that, and already mentioned by the members in this group, that there are other things that actually influence the decision to invest in another country. Now, a paper by Mitsura, also from the OECD, so this is 2019, he looked at a panel data, so looking at 55,000 actually such bilateral investments. So looking at inward FDI stocks and controlling for the aspects of, let's say, distance, let's say, the capacity of the economy, looking at the GDP, looking also at the difference in the GDP, looking also at similarity in terms of language, and also if the country has been a colony before, and looking at so many. So in other words, controlling for the other factors. So the result is that the restrictiveness index actually is still comes out as a barrier. It's a barrier to. I'm looking at my notes. As a barrier to investment with respect to total foreign investments, and then and then if you look at the restriction on foreign equity, it's a barrier to the total foreign investments. If you look at the other restrictions, it's a barrier to the mergers and acquisition type of investments, and also the investments in services. So clearly there is a link between restrictiveness and the FDI, the sort of FDI flows that we receive. Now there's also a question about the link between FDI and economic growth. Again, the direction of causality, is not really as definite as that. There are, of course, many other aspects that you need to consider. But there is a later paper also saying that it really depends on the capacity of the country to absorb that FDI and the kind of FDI that it is actually attracting. So, as you know, there are many objectives of FDI. So one is that it's market seeking. So if you have a big market like China, for instance, then again, it's a magnet for FDI. Second is that it's resource seeking. So if you already have, the resources in place, like mining, like the minerals, then again, it's a magnet for the FDI. And the third one is the kind of FDI that we want, which is efficiency seeking, because we're not really a big market. Minerals, we're kind of still iffy on that. But the efficiency seeking is really the kind of FDI that we want. But this one really means that we have a very productive workforce, very competitive workforce at that. And what is being cited as a determinant of this is really the quality of the education. And this is again another aspect in the Constitution with respect to restrictiveness that we would like to have more discussions about, because we think that this is something that should really be addressed. We looked at other jurisdictions with respect to education, and we see that many of our neighbors actually have lifted the foreign equity restrictions. Malaysia allows 100%, Vietnam allows 100%, Thailand 50%, Indonesia 49%, Singapore 100%, Philippines 40%. And we also look
what specifically ho yun, Yusek Rose, just for the record?
Sorry.
Ano po yung in what investment in what?
Yeah, foreign ownership of educational institutions. So in higher education ito.
Thank you.
Actually for Bangkok it's open kahit ano. Even basic. So in the case of Singapore and also Malaysia later on, there was that conscious, that was a deliberate effort in their case to really build a knowledge economy, to be an education hub for Asia. And so actually there was even a time that they were very active in poaching, all the good professors, whether in the Philippines or in other countries because they really wanted to build that knowledge economy. And actually, they succeeded because there have been many branches, campuses of international schools that have set up. That were set up in the Philippines. Now, I sorry, in Singapore. Now, you might say that we already passed the Transnational Higher Education Act, which already allows for exchange programs, etc. But the problem is that it did not touch on the 60-40 in terms of the ownership of the foreign schools. And then I also looked at the review by the British Council of the higher education institutions in the Philippines, and they listed actually 10 various provisions that they have to face if you are a foreign school. And the constitutional provision is just one of them. The other is the corporation code. You have also the capitalization. You have the national internal revenue code, etc. So 10 of this. So there are, as mentioned in the OECD, when you talk about restrictiveness, it's not just to do with the Constitution, although that's a big part, but there has to be a follow-through with respect to the other aspects. And so, if you are also with respect to investments or production processes, we have what we call a smile curve, where let's say if you draw on the vertical axis the value added, and then on the horizontal axis is the production process from design to the prototyping part up to then the assembly, and then let's say the after sales service, the advertising, etc., etc. So you have that smile curve, meaning that the higher value added is really on the design part, and then also on the after sales, the advertising part. And then here in the middle is the assembly, but that is also where you have the lowest value added. And unfortunately, that's the kind of the FDI that we have. So we are into, we get the raw materials, let's say for manufacturing, and then just do some additional, and then export it. So, and the thing is, we cannot do the design part, and it's really because we have a very low, in terms of the human capital for the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So again, it has to do with, again, the lack of good higher education institutions. And then, already mentioned was the challenge before the Supreme Court of the Philippine the Public Service Act, and so we hope that this could be addressed as well, and we do hope that as mentioned by Attorney Villegas earlier, that we would have the tools, and also the next generation would have the tools necessary to really adjust to a VUCA world. And just for the record, I just want to say as well that the issue of national security is in the PDP, so it's in Chapter 13. Sayang wala na si Professor Carlos. Anyway, I also want to mention.
Sayang, wala na siya.
Wala na siya. Okay, basta on the record, nandiyan siya. Okay. Hindi niya nag-google na maayos. Anyway, I also want to mention that with respect to the MSMEs, and this is what we tried to, we actually addressed in the amendments to the RTLA, the Retail Trade Liberalization Law. That in the Philippines, as you know, the MSMEs is about 99.6% of all enterprises. The micros are actually 90.5%. The small comprise 8.7%, and the medium comprise 0.4%. And we think that this medium, the medium type of enterprises, are really necessary for there to be good competition. They're the ones that can really, present, that can scale up and present that challenge to the large ones, so that they don't have that dominant power. At the same time, that they can actually have more of the backward linkage coming from the micro and the small. When COVID COVID we had COVID. And what happened was the total number of enterprises, to be fair, actually went up from what it was in 2019 all the way to 2022. But it was actually the micro enterprises that increased. The small enterprises declined by 11%, and then the medium scale enterprises declined by 9%. And that is why in the amended RTLA, we made sure that the threshold actually does not include the